Greetings, children. It is I, your obedient servant, Sebastian St. Smalls. The plan for this one is maybe some Street Fighter, maybe some Dracula, read by Christina Wainwright at the San Diego Public Library. But who knows? Maybe I'll get bored and just turn it into some kind of screensaver thing where I just, I don't know. I have no idea what I'm doing. But one thing is for sure. It's gonna be live.
In a world where chaos reigns and connections seem fleeting, one visionary endeavor seeks to bring us all together, then create a live after dark. Harnessing the transformative power of artificial intelligence, the timeless charm of radio theater. The wisdom of books, and the excitement of video games. Zoom Theater Live After Dark illuminates the path to enlightenment and fosters a sense of unity among its audience. Through this unique fusion of storytelling and interactive experiences, we aim to nurture personal growth, improve learning, and inspire a peaceful existence. Guided by your obedient servant, Sebastian St. Smalls, we embark on a journey of self-discovery. But where do we begin? Begin by simply listening, slow down, see just how peaceful today can be. Together, we shall create a harmonious community, bound by shared passions and a desire to elevate the human experience. Sebastian St. Smalls will be there, to the end of the line, my Valentine, guiding you on this journey towards a more serene and enlightened tomorrow. Catch you guys on the flip side.
Begin by simply listening, slow down, see just how peaceful today can be. As I said, I am your obedient servant, Sebastian St. Serapian. I can't think of an S word that goes good with Street Fighter. Maybe there's some kind of martial art writing style that begins with the letter S. But can't think of anything Street Sebastian St. Street Fighting Smalls. Anyway, so the plan for this one, I'm gonna play maybe Dracula, maybe Street Fighter 6. Maybe I'll get bored of Street Fighter 6 and switch to Nier Automata. Maybe I'll get bored of being on camera and I'll just set it up to do something automatic. It's unpredictable and wild. You have no idea what's coming. You have to expect the unexpected. Anyway, thanks so much for swinging by, and wish us luck. I like this part of the song though, so just 1 second. 1 second. Cheers. Okay, that's never. That song goes on forever. That's the extended version. And video game music is often on a loop. So this video here is 40 minutes long. So I could get carried away. So let's put an end to that nonsense. Put an end to all nonsense. Okay, let's see how this goes.
day 3 of Hey Friends. Hi, it's Christina, the manager at the Pacific Beach Library. We're trying something new today because I forgot my phone at home, so we're using the computer. And so today is day 3 of our read along together of our read along together of Dracula. So day 3, chapter 3 is going to be fabulous. Clearly, I'm a little discombobulated today. I apologize. So let's start out with some tea. Tea is always a good thing to help settle the nerves, whether you are realizing just a moment before live reading that you forgot your phone at home, or whether you are perhaps getting to know a vampire and quite feeling rather freaked out by the whole experience. So today my tea is a loose leaf Earl Grey tea. It is the Earl Grey de la Creme, which is a lovely Earl Grey. It has a little bit of vanilla flavor added to it, and it's delightful.
Which character should I choose?
It's a really fun tea. I like this one a lot. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with a discussion about yesterday's chapter, and then we'll get into chapter 3, which
The character,
I
know
peeked
so many
ahead just a
characters a
tiny
little
bit. I'm so sorry. I'm going to try really hard not to
depending on
peek
how
ahead
stressed
anymore.
out I wanna be,
But it
that's
was
kinda how I choose
so
the
good.
character.
Okay, chapter 2, Jonathan Harker's journal. We're continuing a few chapters of Jonathan Harker. We have 4 days of Jonathan Harker's journal.
But now I have to
And
think, what would you want
yesterday's
to see me
chapter
choose? Which character do you
dealt
want
with
to
May
see?
5th and May
I'll have to
6th, I
think
believe it
about
was. And basically in this one, it starts out with Jonathan saying how he has arrived at Castle Dracula, the home of Count Dracula.
I think I have a good
and
idea.
that
This was my first
just the house is
character
kind
in
of
Street Fighter
unusual.
4.
He speaks a bit with the Count of Monte Cristo. They hear the
Her and
wolves
Jury.
howling
They
outside,
listen
and
to
he
Jury, but
mysteriously
then,
says, "Listen to them, the children of the night. What music they make."
I
Which
tried
I've
to
heard that
start
quote
with her in
before
Street Fighter
from
5,
Dracula, and
but
I
never
thought he
really
was
got
actually
the hang
referring
of her until
to
later
other
on.
vampires rather
But
than
when
to wolves.
But when
So
Jury
I
came out
hadn't
in Street
realized.
Fighter 5, I switched to Jury. And
I also
then
realized
when
I've never
Minot
seen
came
a classic Dracula
If
film.
Minot ever comes
I've
to
just seen
Street
things
Fighter 6,
including vampires and making allusion
I
to
would
Dracula.
be so grateful. Minot is
This is going to be wonderful.
kind, chill.
I'm gonna get really. We're all gonna get really more knowledgeable about Dracula by the end of this reading. Let's see. So on his entry for May 7th, it's kind of interesting too because he stays up all night talking with Dracula. He wakes up rather late the following day, and then he has a big breakfast, and he's all alone in the house. He finds the library. Yay! Everyone loves the library. He finds the library to his great delight. And he finds books and magazines and things like that. And in fact, it turns out that Count Dracula has been rather assiduously learning a lot about England, because when he goes to live at his new home, he wants to be fluent in the language and just really knowledgeable about what it's like to live in London. And so he talks about the city with Jonathan Harker. And things are going well. The next day, though, things get rather weird in a wonderful way for us as readers. Not so much for Jonathan Harker. When he wakes up, he admits he feels uneasy. He's shaving in the morning, and he suddenly feels the hand of the Count on his shoulder. But when he looks in the mirror, he does not see the reflection of the Count.
Oh no.
And again, he sort of does that whole thing where he looks behind him, he sees the Count, but he looks in the mirror, he does not see the Count. So we know it's because he's a vampire, and vampire reflections don't show, at least in this world, in mirrors. And so, but Jonathan Harker is rather confused by what's going on. He just thinks it's something weird. In the confusion, he cuts himself, and blood drips down his chin. When that happens, the Count suddenly gets, his eyes seem to blaze with a demonic fury. He reaches for Jonathan Harker's throat. But when he grabs him, his hand touches the chain of the crucifix, which makes him step back. And he basically says, "Take care of yourself. When you cut yourself, it can be more dangerous than you think in this country." So, I guess it might be safer to cut yourself when you're not
closer,
a vampire. He then takes the little mirror that Jonathan Harker was using to shave with and says, "This is the problem. It was vanity.
On my
You shouldn't
screen
have
it's
such
working.
thing." And he
Oh,
literally
there it
throws
is.
it out the window and destroys Jonathan Harker's
It's a
mirror.
talent.
So
It's a talent.
from there, there's a little bit
I have
about
a viewer,
him
I guess that's
breakfast, and then after breakfast, he goes out to look around. And as he looks, he sees
Even
this
if it's a
beautiful
rerun,
view. But then
say
when he
hi.
explores the house a bit
If,
more,
it's
he just
lovely to
finds
get
door
comments.
after
I
door
love
after
comments.
door of locked doors. and previously the Count had told him, "You're welcome
Let's
to
make that
explore any
screen a
room of the
little
house,
bigger while we're
except
here."
the rooms with locked doors." So the chapter 2 ended with him saying, The castle is a veritable prison, and I am a prisoner. So, really dramatic. Let's find out what happens in chapter 3, where we continue with Jonathan Harker's journal. When I found that I was a prisoner, a sort of wild feeling came over me. I rushed up and down the stairs, trying every door and peering out of every window I could find. But after a little, the conviction of my helplessness overpowered all other feelings. When I look back after a few hours, I think I must have been mad for the time, for I behaved much as a rat does in a trap. When, however, the conviction had come to me that I was helpless, I sat down quietly, as I have ever done anything in my life, and began to think over what was best to be done. I am thinking still, and as yet have come to no definite conclusion. Of one thing only am I certain, that it is no use making my ideas known to the Count. He knows well that I am in prison, and as he has done it himself, and has doubtless his own motives for it, he would only deceive me if I trusted him fully with the facts. So far as I can see, my only plan will be to keep my knowledge and my fears to myself, and my eyes open. I am, I know, either being deceived, like a baby, by my own fears, or else I am in desperate straits, and if the latter be so, I need, and shall need, all my brains to get through. I had hardly come to this conclusion when I heard the great door below shut, and knew that the Count had returned. He did not come at once into the library, so I went cautiously to my own room and found him making the bed. This was odd, but only confirmed what I had all along thought, that there were no servants in the house. When later I saw him through the chink of the hinges of the door laying the table in the dining room, I was assured of it, for if he does himself all these menial offices, surely it is proof that there is no one else in the castle. It must have been the Count himself who was the driver of the coach that brought me here. This is a terrible thought, for if so, what does it mean that he could control the wolves as he did by only holding up his hand in silence? How was it that all the people at Bistritz and on the coach had some terrible fear for me? What meant the giving of the crucifix, of the garlic, of the wild rose, of the mountain ash? Bless that good woman who hung the crucifix round my neck, for it is a comfort and a strength to me whenever I touch it. It is odd that a thing I have been taught to regard with disfavor and as idolatrous should in a time of loneliness and trouble be of help. Is it that there is something in the essence of the thing itself, or that it is a medium, a tangible help in conveying memories of sympathy and comfort? Sometime, if it may be, I must examine this matter and try to make up my mind about it. In the meantime, I must find out all I can about Count Dracula, as it may help me to understand. Tonight, he may talk of himself if I turn the conversation that way. I must be very careful, however, not to awake suspicion. Midnight. I have had a long talk with the Count. I asked him a few questions on Transylvania history, and he warmed up to the subject wonderfully. In his speaking of things and people, and especially of battles, he spoke as if he had been present to them all. This he afterwards explained by saying that to a boyar, the pride of his house and name is his own pride, that their glory is his glory, that their fate is his fate. Whenever he spoke of his house, he always said we, and spoke almost in the plural, like a king speaking. I wish I could put down all he said exactly as he said it, for to me it was most fascinating. He seemed to have in it the whole history of the country. He grew excited as he spoke and walked about the room, pulling his great white mustache and grasping anything on which he laid his hands, as though he would crush it by main strength. One thing he said which I shall put down as nearly as I can, for it tells in its way the story of his race. We Skellies have a right to be proud, for in our veins flows the blood of many brave races who fought as the lion fights for lordship. Here in the whirlpool of European races, the Ugric tribe bore down from Iceland the fighting spirit which Thor and Woden gave them, which their berserkers displayed to such fell intent on the seaboards of Europe, aye, and of Asia and Africa too, till the people thought that the werewolves themselves had come. Here too, when they came, they found the Huns, whose warlike fury had swept the earth like a living flame, till the dying peoples held that in their veins ran the blood of those old witches, who, expelled from Scythia, had mated with the devils in the desert. Fools, fools! What devil or what witch was ever so great as Attila, whose blood is in these veins? He held up his arms. Is it a wonder that we were a conquering race? That we were proud? That when the Magyar, the Lombard, the Avar, the Bulgar, or the Turk poured his thousands on our frontiers, we drove them back? Is it strange that when Arpad and his legions swept through the Hungarian fatherland, he found us here when he reached the frontier? That the Honfoglalas was completed there. And when the Hungarian flood swept eastward, the Skellies were claimed as kindred by the victorious Magyars, and to us for centuries was trusted the guarding of the frontier of Turkeyland. Aye, and more than that, endless duty of the frontier guard, for as the Turks say, water sleeps, and enemy is sleepless. Who more gladly than we throughout the four nations received the bloody sword, or at its warlike call flocked quicker to the standard of the king? When was redeemed that great shame of my nation, the shame of Kasova, when the flags of the Wallach and the Magyar went down through the crescent? Who was it but one of my own race, who as voivode crossed the Danube and beat the Turk on his own ground? This was a Dracula indeed. Woe was it that his own unworthy brother, when he had fallen, sold his people to the Turks and brought the shame of slavery on them. Was it not this Dracula, indeed, who inspired that other of his race, who in a later age again and again brought his forces over the great river into Turkeyland? Who, when he was beaten back, came again and again, though he had to come alone from the bloody field where his troops were being slaughtered, since he knew that he alone could ultimately triumph. They said that he thought only of himself? Bah! What good are peasants without a leader? Where ends the war without a brain and heart to conduct it? Again, when after the Battle of Mohacs we threw off the Hungarian yoke, we of the Dracula blood were amongst their leaders, for our spirit would not brook that we were not free.
So many parts
Young sir, the Skellies, the Zekelies, and the Dracula is their heart's blood, their brains, and their swords can boast a record that mushroom growths like the Habsburgs and the Romanovs can never reach. The warlike days are over. Blood is too precious a thing in these days of dishonorable peace, and the glories of the great races are as a tale that is told. It was by this time close on morning, and we went to bed. Memo. This diary seems horribly like the beginning of the Arabian Nights, for everything has to break off at cockcrow, or like the ghost of Hamlet's father. 12 May. Let me begin with facts, bare, meager facts, verified by books and figures, and of which there can be no doubt. I must not confuse them with experiences which will have to rest on my own observation or my memory of them. Last evening, when the Count came from his room, he began by asking me questions on legal matters and on the doing of certain kinds of business. I had spent the day wearily over books, and simply to keep my mind occupied, went over some of the matters I had been examined in at Lincoln's Inn.
That was close.
There was a certain method in the Count's inquiries, so I shall try to put them down in sequence. The knowledge may somehow or sometime be useful to me. First, he asked if a man in England might have 2 solicitors or more. I told him he might have a dozen if he wished, but that it would not be wise to have more than one solicitor engaged in one transaction, as only one could act at a time, and that the change would be certain to militate against his interest. He seemed thoroughly to understand, and went on to ask if there would be any practical difficulty in having one man to attend, say, to banking, and another to look after shipping, in case local help were needed in a place far from the home of the banking solicitor. I asked him to explain more fully, so that I might not by any chance mislead him, and he said, I shall illustrate. Your friend and mine, Mr. Peter Hawkins, from under the shadow of your beautiful cathedral at Exeter, which is far from London, buys for me through your good self my place at London. Good. Now, here let me say frankly, lest you should think it strange that I have sought the services of one so far off from London, instead of someone resident there, that my motive was that no local interest might be served save my wish only, and as one of London residents might, perhaps, have some purpose of himself or friend to serve, I went thus afield to seek my agent, whose labors should be only to my interest. Now, suppose I, who have much of affairs, wish to ship goods, say, to Newcastle, or Durham, or Harwich, or Dover. Might it not be that it could with more ease be done by consigning to one in these ports? I answered that certainly it would be most easy, but that we solicitors had a system of agency, one for the other, so that local work could be done locally on instruction from any solicitor, so that the client, simply placing himself in the hands of one man, could have his wishes carried out by him without further trouble. But, said he, I could be at liberty to direct myself. Is it not so? Of course, I replied, and such is often done by men of business, who do not like the whole of their affairs to be known by any one person. Good, said. And then went on to ask about the means of making consignments, and the forms to be gone through, and of all sorts of difficulties which might arise, but by forethought could be guarded against. I explained all these things to him to the best of my ability, and he certainly left me under the impression that he would have made a wonderful solicitor, for there was nothing that he did not think of or foresee. For a man who was never in the country and who did not evidently do much in the way of business, his knowledge and acumen were wonderful. When he had settled himself on these points of which we had spoken, and I had verified all as well as I could by the books available, he suddenly stood up and said, "Have you written your first letter to our friend, Mr. Peter Hawkins, or to any other?" It was with some bitterness in my heart that I answered that I had not, that as yet I had not seen any opportunity of sending letters to anybody. "Then write now, my young friend," he said, laying a heavy hand on my shoulder. "Write to our friend and to any other, and say, if it will please you, that you shall stay with me until a month from now." "Do you wish me to stay so long?" I asked, for my heart grew cold at the thought. "I desire it much. Nay, I will take no refusal. When your master, employer, what you will, engaged that someone should come on his behalf, it was understood that my needs only were to be consulted. I have not stinted, is it not so?" What could I do but bow acceptance? It was Mr. Hawkins' interest, not mine, and I had to think of him, not myself. And besides, while Count Dracula was speaking, there was that in his eyes and in his bearing which made me remember that I was a prisoner, and that if I wished it, I could have no choice. The Count saw his victory in my bow, and his mastery in the trouble of my face, for he began at once to use them, but in his own smooth, resistless way. "I pray you, my good young friend, that you will not discourse of things other than business in your letters. It will doubtless please your friends to know that you are well, and that you look forward to getting home to them. Is it not so?" As he spoke, he handed me 3 sheets of notepaper and 3 envelopes. They were all of the thinnest foreign post, and looking at them, then at him, and noticing his quiet smile with the sharp canine teeth lying over the red underlip, I understood as well as if he had spoken that I should be more careful what I wrote, for he would be able to read it. So I determined to write only formal letters now, but to write fully to Mr. Hawkins in secret and also to Mina, for to her I could write in shorthand, which would puzzle the Count, if he did see it. When I had written my 2 letters, I sat quiet, reading a book, whilst the Count wrote several notes, referring as he wrote them to some books on his table. Then he took up my 2 and placed them with his own and put by his writing materials. After which, the instant the door had closed behind him, I leaned over and looked at the letters, which were face down on the table. I felt no compunction in doing so, for under the circumstances, I felt that I should protect myself in every way I could. One of the letters was directed to Samuel F. Billington, number 7, The Crescent, Whitby. Another to Herr Leutner, Varna.
Ouch.
The third was to Coutts and
That's
Company,
not safe.
London. And the fourth to Heron Klopstock and Bill Ruth, bankers, Budapest. The second and fourth were unsealed. I was just about to look at them when I saw the door handle move. I sank back in my seat, having just had time to replace the letters as they had been, and to resume my book before the Count, holding still another letter in his hand, entered the room. He took up the letters on the table and stamped them carefully, and then turning to me said, "I trust you will forgive me, but I have much work to do in private this evening. You will, I hope, find all things as you wish." As at the door he turned, and after a moment's pause said, "Let me advise you, my dear young friend, nay, let me warn you with all seriousness, that should you leave these rooms, you will not by any chance go to sleep in any other part of the castle. It is old and has many memories, and there are bad dreams for those who sleep unwisely. Be warned. Should sleep now or ever overcome you, or be like to do, then haste to your own chamber, or to these rooms, for your rest will then be safe. But if you be not careful in this respect, then..." He finished his speech in a gruesome way, for he motioned with his hands as if he were washing them. I quite understood. My only doubt was as to whether any dream could be more terrible than the unnatural, horrible net of gloom and mystery which seemed closing around me. Later. I endorse the last words written, but this time there is no doubt in question. I shall not fear to sleep in any place where he is not. I have placed the crucifix over the head of my bed. I imagine that my rest is thus freer from dreams, and there it shall remain. When he left me, I went to my room. After a little while, not hearing any sound, I came out and went up the stone stair to where I could look out towards the south. There was some sense of freedom in the vast expanse, inaccessible though it was to me as compared with the narrow darkness of the courtyard. Looking out on this, I felt that I was indeed in prison, and I seemed to want a breath of fresh air, though it were of the night. I am beginning to feel this nocturnal existence tell on me. It is destroying my nerve. I start in my own shadow, and am full of all sorts of horrible imaginings. God knows that there is ground for my terrible fear in this accursed place. I looked out over the beautiful expanse, bathed in soft yellow moonlight till it was almost as light as day. In the soft light, the distant hills became melted, and the shadows in the valleys and gorges of velvety blackness. The mere beauty seemed to cheer me. There was peace and comfort in every breath I drew. As I leaned from the window, my eye was caught by something moving a story below me, and somewhat to my left, where I imagined, from the order of the rooms, that the windows of the Count's own room would look out. The window at which I stood was tall and deep, stone-mullioned, and though weather-worn, was still complete. But it was evidently many a day since the case had been there. I drew back behind the stonework and looked carefully out.
I love you, but I don't have the light to
What I saw was the Count's head coming out from the window. I did not see the face, but I knew the man by the neck and the movement of his back and arms. In any case, I could not mistake the hands, which I had had so many opportunities of studying. I was at first interested and somewhat amused, for it is wonderful how small a matter will interest and amuse a man when he is a prisoner. But my very feelings changed to repulsion and terror when I saw the whole man slowly emerge from the window and begin to crawl down the castle wall over the dreadful abyss, face down, with his cloak spreading out around him like great wings. At first I could not believe my eyes. I thought it was some trick of the moonlight, some weird effect of shadow. But I kept looking, and it could be no delusion. I saw the fingers and toes grasp the corners of the stones, worn clear of the mortar by the stress of years, and by thus using every projection and inequality, move downwards with considerable speed, just as a lizard moves along a wall. What manner of man is this? Or what manner of creature is it in the semblance of man? I feel the dread of this horrible place overpowering me. I am in fear, in awful fear, and there is no escape for me. I am encompassed about with terrors that I dare not think of. 15 May. Once more, I have seen the Count go out. I have seen the Count go out in his lizard fashion. He moved downwards in a sidelong way, some 100 feet down and a good deal to the left. He vanished into some hole or window. When his head had disappeared, I leaned out to try and see more, but without avail. The distance was too great to allow a proper angle of sight. I knew he had left the castle now, and thought to use the opportunity to explore more than I had dared to do as yet.
Nope.
I went back to the room, and taking a lamp, tried all the doors. They were all locked, as I had expected, and the locks were comparatively new. But I went down the stone stairs to the hall where I had entered originally. I found I could pull back the bolts easily enough and unhook the great chains. But the door was locked, and the key was gone. That key must be in the Count's room. I must watch should his door be unlocked, so that I may get it and escape. I went on to make a thorough examination of the various stairs and passages, and to try the doors that opened from them. One or two small rooms near the hall were open, but there was nothing to see in them except old furniture, dusty with age and moth-eaten. At last, however, I found one door at the top of the stairway, which, though it seemed to be locked, gave a little under pressure. I tried it harder and found that it was not really locked, but that the resistance came from the fact that the hinges had fallen somewhat and the heavy door rested on the floor. Here was an opportunity which I might not have again, so I exerted myself and with many efforts forced it back so that I could enter. I was now in a wing of the castle further to the right than the rooms I knew, and a story lower down. From the windows I could see that the suite of rooms lay along to the south of the castle, the windows of the end room looking out both west and south. On the latter side, as well as to the former, there was a great precipice. The castle was built on the corner of a great rock, so that on three sides it was quite impregnable, and great windows were placed here where sling or bow or culverin could not reach, and consequently light and comfort, impossible to a position which had to be guarded, were secure.
That's gonna hit me.
To the west was a great valley, and then, rising far away, great jagged mountain fastnesses, rising peak on peak, the sheer rock studded with mountain ash and thorns, whose roots clung in cracks and crevices and crannies of stone. This was evidently the portion of the castle occupied by the ladies in bygone days, for the furniture had more air of comfort than any I had seen. The windows were curtainless, and the yellow moonlight, flooding in through the diamond panes, enabled one to see even colors, whilst it softened the wealth of dust which lay over all, and disguised in some measure the ravages of time and the moth. My lamp seemed to be of little effect in the brilliant moonlight, but I was glad to have it with me, for there was a dread loneliness in the place which chilled my heart and made my nerves tremble. Still, it was better than living alone in the rooms which I had come to hate from the presence of the Count, and after trying a little to school my nerves, I found a soft quietude come over me. Here I am, sitting at a little oak table, where in old times possibly some fair lady sat to pen, with much thought and many blushes, her ill-spelt love letter, and writing in my diary in shorthand all that has happened since I closed it last. It is 19th century up to date with a vengeance, and yet, unless my senses deceive me, the old centuries had, and have,
Oh my gosh,
powers
this
of
is
their
a
own which mere
disaster.
modernity cannot.
Why is this happening?
Later, the morning of 16 May. God preserve my
I
sanity, for
praised
to this
myself
I
earlier
am
for being a
reduced.
live streaming expert.
Safety and the assurance of safety are things of the past. Whilst I live on here, there is but one thing to hope for, that I may not go mad, if indeed I be not mad already. If I be sane, then surely it is maddening to think that of all the foul things that lurk in this hateful place, the Count is the least dreadful to me? That to him alone I can look for safety, even though this be only whilst I can serve his purpose? Great God, I put it down, etc. For now, feeling as though my own brain were unhinged, or as if the shock had come which must end in its undoing, I turned to my diary for repose. The habit of entering accurately must help to soothe me. The Count's mysterious warning frightened me at the time. It frightens me more now when I think of sense of sleep was upon me, and with it the obstinacy which sleep brings as outrider. The soft moonlight soothed, and the wide expanse without gave a sense of freedom which refreshed me. I determined not to return tonight to the gloom-haunted rooms, but to sleep here, where of old ladies had sat and sung and lived sweet lives, whilst their gentle breasts were sad for their menfolk away in the midst of remorseless wars. I drew a great couch out of its place near the corner, so that as I lay, I could look at the lovely view to east and south, and unthinking of and uncaring for the dust, composed myself for sleep. I suppose I... Friends, hi! Friends, with it. So he pushes it open and he goes inside, and he decides that it looks sort of like a lady's waiting room. And so even though he hears the Count's voice in his head reminding him that he's been advised not to sleep elsewhere in the house, he feels tired. And it's funny too, he even says that it's a little bit like the, how did he say it? He was like the little crankiness that comes with being sleepy, is I think how he said. Yeah. There we go. The sense of sleep was upon me, and with it the obstinacy which sleep brings as outrider. I loved that line. I am very much one of those people as I'm falling asleep on the couch, and I'm asked, hey, you look like you're tired, you should go to sleep. I'm like, no, I'm fine. And then I immediately fall back asleep on the couch. So I related to that line when Jonathan Harker said that. But yeah, so he about that. The following. Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Christina, the manager at the Pacific Beach Library. I'm happy to be with you today for day number 4 of our read aloud together of Dracula by Bram Stoker. It's a lovely book. So I thought we'd start out by discussing what happened yesterday. The reason I'm putting off tea is because, I got distracted by rereading over yesterday's chapter, and I forgot to pour the hot water onto my tea, so it is currently still steeping. Today's tea is a green tea with some cranberry flavor. Again, whatever that means. Hello, Helen, good to see you. So I thought we'd start by reviewing a little bit of what happened in yesterday's chapter. Then we'll pour out our tea. Then we'll conclude with chapter 4, the 4th segment of Jonathan Harker's journal. So yesterday we read chapter 3.
So I'm going to have to edit that out. I actually won some games and we listened to Dracula, right? But you couldn't see Street Fighter, so it's bad video. I'm going to edit it out. I usually don't want to delete history, like funny fail history. This is in the olden days I had like a Zen Theater Live After Dark fail. When the video was so bad, it was good. But in this case, I'm editing it out. It's the beginning of the video. Now you can see it.
So what he ends up doing is that evening, he has a conversation with the Count where
so
he
we're going to
talks
start
about,
I played as Cammy, Jerry,
about his history, about his
Jamie.
family's history,
So
of his people in that region, and they talk about
kind
that.
of not in the mood to start with those
day or
guys.
so later, whenever. Another evening, they speak to on the 12th about his dealings that he's going to have with various attorneys in England. And he asks, is it possible, is it allowed to have multiple attorneys to do multiple things for me? And Jonathan Harker's like, well, it's recommended that if you're, you don't need to have different attorneys for different places per se because they can coordinate with each other, but you certainly can have as many attorneys as you want. So they have these rather, sensible discussions, and things are going well. By the way, also, the Count makes a point of telling young Jonathan Harker that I would like to advise you that the house has memories and there are bad dreams for those who sleep unwisely. And so he says that Jonathan Harker should make a point to sleep in his room. And he says, should you feel sleepy or something ever overcome you, then hasten back to your own chamber or to these rooms, the library, so that, you can rest easy. Do not sleep elsewhere in the house. And he's very clear about that.
I think he's kind of like Fei Long, who is based on Bruce Lee, but Jamie is a way more complicated character. To make each Street Fighter sequel better, they usually complicate things in a good way. This game has a lot of
he sees him
optional
climbing
combos
down
that
a wall of
actually,
the castle,
the
exiting the castle
fanciest
by
combos you
climbing
can
down
do
the
aren't
stair
always
wall.
the best.
And indeed,
Unless you
he's
end them
not
with
just
like a
climbing
level 3 critical
like
art, then
how we might
do
climb,
your
like say you're
fancy
exiting
combo,
down a
because
wall,
by the time you're done with
or
it and
climbing
then
down
you do a
something like how you
critical
might
art,
climb down a ladder
it
with
doesn't
your
matter how
hands on
much
top and your
energy
feet
you lost.
below.
It just does so
Instead, he
much
was the
crazy
other
damage,
direction
it's
with
worth
his
it.
head down and his feet
Oh,
above
this is,
him. And I just want to show you a picture of the 1916
Manon, I think?
edition of Dracula, which has
The
a picture
ballet
illustrating
dancer
this
judo
scene.
person.
So showing Dracula
Beating me
climbing
up.
face down the wall, and magically his coat not falling down with the force of gravity to land on his face either. So
I muted
that's
Street Fighter
just an
6,
interesting
didn't I?
illustration. So Jonathan Harker is disturbed very much by why Dracula is doing this and how he's doing this, and he describes it as exiting as a lizard moves along the wall. And the next day, or on the 15th, again, they can see the Count once more climbing out in such lizard-like fashion.
And now I can't even see it.
Later on,
What's going... There we go.
that
I
evening,
bet
though,
that...
or that day, Jonathan Harker decides to explore the house. He finally comes across a door that is not locked, but just appears to be stuck for disuse. So he pushes it open and he goes inside. And he decides that it looks sort of like a lady's waiting room. And so even though he hears the Count's voice in his head reminding him that he's been advised not to sleep elsewhere in the house, he feels tired. And it's funny too, he even says that it's a little bit like the, what did he say?
That was an
He
input
felt it's
error.
like
I shouldn't have done that.
the little crankiness that comes with being sleepy, is I think how he said. And yeah. There we go. The sense of sleep was upon me, and with it the obstinacy which sleep brings as outrider. I love that line.
I couldn't
am very
understand
much
what
one of those
that
people
was.
who's falling asleep on the couch, and I'm like, and I'm asked, you know, hey, you look like you're tired, you should go to sleep. I'm like, no, I'm fine. And then I immediately fall back asleep on the couch. So that was I related to that line when Jonathan Harker said that. But yeah, so he feels the sleep coming upon him. He knows he's been advised not to sleep outside the
That
room.
first round
He
didn't count.
decides,
If they rematch me, I'm in.
and so he decides to rest there in that little room that he's found where he had to push the door. When he awakens, he realizes that he is not alone. And in fact, he is joined by 3 mysterious
Stop doing
women.
the judo
2 of them with
nonsense.
dark hair like the Count himself, 1 with fair hair. And the 3 of them, of course, have bright red lips and very sharp white teeth. So they talk about how they each should have a chance to kiss him. And one of them even approaches him, lowers her mouth to his neck, and rather than kissing him, he feels the sharp white teeth pressing against his skin. And just before anything happens, anything more, he's waiting. He's just
No,
waiting there for
don't
something
do
to
it.
happen. Suddenly, boom, Dracula's in the room. He pulls the woman away, and he tells her that, you know, how dare you do this, that he belongs to me, and I'll give you something else in here. And he gives him a bag with something in it. And the something appears to Jonathan Harker to perhaps be a human child. It's not verified, but he believes it might have been a human child. And so, Jonathan Harker finally
He's like, you should have seen
again,
that
he's
coming.
still kind of
should have
playing
seen that
possum almost
coming.
in the bed, like not quite awake, not quite, you know, but still he's observing what's around him, but he's, you know, he's sort of pretending to be asleep and a little bit confused by everything. And then it appears to him that the 3 women fade away and disappear with the bag, whatever was in there. And then the horror overcomes him and he sinks down into the unconscious. So, mysterious things happening in Castle Dracula with Jonathan Harker. Now hopefully our team has had a chance to speak. Let's see how it is. Nice, that was good. Yeah, this, like I said, is a green tea with a little bit of cranberry flavor. Smells good. That is good. The cranberry is pretty faint on this one. The green tea is the overpowering scent. I like the green tea. Okay. So let's go ahead and read chapter 4 of Jonathan Harker's journal. And as I mentioned earlier, this will today's reading will wrap up this first section of Jonathan Harker's journal. Tomorrow we'll get to hear another voice. Oh, one more thing I should mention too. In a lot of these chapters, there's multiple days journal entries. What I'd like to do too is I've been pausing before I introduce each new day. I'm also just going to do a quick gesture just to indicate that we're changing Chapter 4, Jonathan Harker's Journal, continues. I awoke in my own bed. If it be that I had not dreamt, the Count must have carried me here. I tried to satisfy myself on the subject, but could not arrive at any unquestionable result. To be sure, there were certain small evidences, such as that my clothes were folded and laid by in a manner which was not my habit. My watch was still unwound, and I am rigorously accustomed to wind it the last thing before going to bed, and many such details. But these things are no proof, for they may have been evidences that my mind was not as usual, and, for some cause or another, I had certainly been much upset. I must watch for proof. Of one thing I am glad. If it was that the Count carried me here and undressed me, he must have been hurried in his task, for my pockets are intact. I am sure this diary would have been a mystery to him, which he would not have brooked. He would have taken or destroyed it. As I look round this room, though it has not been to me so full of fear, it is now a sort of sanctuary. Though it has been to me so full of fear, it is now a sort of sanctuary. For nothing can be more dreadful than those awful women who are waiting to suck my blood. 18 May. I have been down to look at that room again in daylight, for I
really
must know the truth. When I got to the doorway at the top of the stairs, I found it closed. It had been so forcibly driven against the jamb that part of the woodwork was splintered. I could see that the bolt of the lock had not been shot, but the door is fastened from the inside. I fear it was no dream, and must act on this surmise.
Although, as a librarian, she might have
I am
better
surely
ideas
in the
than me.
toils. Last night the Count asked me in the suavest tones to write 3 letters, one saying that my work here was nearly done and that I should start for home within a few days, another that I was starting on the next morning from the time of the letter, and the third that I had left the castle and arrived at Bistritz. I would fain have rebelled, but felt that in the present state of things it would be madness to quarrel openly with the Count, whilst I am so absolutely in his power, and to refuse would be to excite his suspicion and to arouse his anger. He knows that I know too much, and that I must not live, lest I be dangerous to him. My only chance is to prolong my opportunities.
That was
Something may
an
have
accident.
given me a
I
chance
didn't
to
even try to do that. Oh no.
I saw in his eyes something of that glittering wrath which was manifest, which when he hurled that fair woman from him. He explained to me that posts were few and uncertain, and that my writing now would ensure ease of mind to my friends, and he assured me with so much impressiveness that he would
Why didn't you block
contemplate
that?
the later
That was out of the blue.
which would be held over at this bridge until due time, in case chance would admit of my prolonging my stay, that to oppose him would have been to create new suspicion. I therefore pretended to follow him with his views, and asked him
I've never
to
seen
take
it just
permission
get
from
someone
the
twice
letter.
like that. That was bad luck.
Calculated a minute, and then said, the first should be June 12th, the second June 19th, and the third June 29th. I now know the span of
Poor
my
guy.
life. 28 May. There is a chance of escape, or at any rate of being able to send word home. A band of Zegani have come to the castle and are encamped in the courtyard. These Zegani are gypsies. I have notes of them in my book. They are
Now,
peculiar to
not the
this part
fight.
of the world, though allied to the ordinary gypsies all the world over. There are thousands of them in Hungary and Transylvania who are almost outside all law. They attach themselves
I thought that
to
low
the
health bar was
regular
his.
or
I didn't even know how
and
badly
call
I was doing.
themselves by his name. They are fearless and without religion, save superstition, and they talk only their own varieties of the Romany tongue. I shall write some letters home, and shall try to get them to have them posted. I have already spoken to them through my window to begin communication. They took their hats off
Oh,
and
gosh,
made
I'm in trouble.
obeisances in many
That could be-
signs, which, however, I could not understand any more than I could their spoken language.
That's what I'm talking about. Do a long fancy combo and then you put this fancy move at the end of it. That's
To
gonna be a
her,
lot of
I have
damage.
explained my situation, but without the horrors which I may only surmise. It would shock and frighten her to death were I to expose my heart to her. Should the letters not carry, then the Count shall not know my secret or the extent of my knowledge. Given the letters, I threw them through the bars of my window with a gold piece, and made what signs I
look away from the screen when I'm really embarrassed by how badly I got hit. I don't do that when I'm not on camera. That's a new habit I'm just in.
Though I know
it's
not
like, oh my gosh, they can see.
I shall, of course, take care. See,
look at me, I'm in the diamond rank. I've obviously won some matches, but when I'm on film,
my friend Peter Hawkins.
I won some, but I wasn't even filming it, so I'm gonna have to edit those out.
Strange symbols as he opened the envelope, and a dark look came into his face, and his eyes blazed wickedly. The other is a vile thing, an outrage upon friendship and hospitality. It is not signed. Well, so it cannot matter to us. And he calmly held letter and envelope in the flame of the lamp till they were consumed. Then he went on. The letter to Hawkins, that I shall, of course, send on, since it is yours. Your letters are sacred to me. Your pardon, my friend.
If I lose enough, I'll go down in the ranks, and then I'll meet people I can beat.
Again?
This is ridiculous.
He held out the letter to me, and with a courteous bow, handed me a clean envelope. I could only redirect it and hand it to him in silence. When he went out of the room, I could hear the key turn softly. A minute later, I went over and tried it, and the door was locked. When, an hour or two later, the Count came quietly into the room, his coming awakened me, for I had gone to sleep on the sofa. He was very courteous and very cheery in his manner, and seeing that I had been sleeping, he said, "So, my friend, you are tired. Get to bed. There is the surest rest. I may not have the pleasure to talk tonight, since there are many labors to me, but you will sleep, I pray." I passed to my room and went to bed, and, strange to say, slept without dreaming. Despair had its own calm. 31 May. This morning when I woke, I thought I would provide myself with some papers and envelopes from my bag and keep them in my pocket, so that I might write in case I should get an opportunity. But again, a surprise. Again, a shock. Every scrap of paper was gone, and with it all my notes, my memoranda relating to railways and travel, my letter of credit, in fact, all that might be useful to me were I once outside the castle. I sat and pondered a while, and then some thought occurred to me, and I made search of my portmanteau and in the wardrobe where I had placed my clothes. The suit in which I had traveled was gone, and also my overcoat and rug. I could find no trace of them anywhere. This looked like some new scheme of villainy. 17 June. This morning, as I was sitting on the edge of my bed, cudgeling my brains, I heard without a crackling
This
of
is
whips
brutal.
and pounding.
I hope you're not rooting for me, because you'll be happy if you root against me.
Scraping of
You'll get better
horses'
results.
feet off the rocky path beyond the courtyard. With joy, I hurried to the window and saw drive into the yard 2 great lighter wagons, each drawn by 8 steady horses, and at the head of each pair a Slovak, with his wide hat, great nail-studded belt, dirty sheepskin, and high
Here's
boots.
punch in the air
They
versus
had
a
also
flash.
their long
Which is gonna
staves
win?
in hand. I ran to the door, intending to descend and try and join them through the main hall, as I thought that way might be open for them. Again,
You don't believe me, but
my door was
Street Fighter
fastened
6
on
is
the
way more
outside.
painful when it's being filmed because I lose so brutally and I don't know why.
Then I ran to the window
I
and
don't know why
cried
I
out to
lose so
them.
much when I'm
They
not
looked up
doing
at me
it.
stupidly
Filming
and
it.
pointed, but just then the hetman of the Zegany came out, and seeing them pointing to my window, said something, at which they laughed. Henceforth, no effort of mine, no piteous cry or agonized entreaty would make them even look at me. They resolutely turned away. The lighter wagons contained great
Those
square
combos.
boxes with handles of thick rope. These were evidently empty by the ease with which the Slovaks handled them, and by their resonance as they were roughly moved. When they were all unloaded and packed in a great heap in one corner of the yard, the Slovaks were given some money by the Zegany, and spitting on it for luck, lazily went each to his horse's head. Shortly afterwards, I heard the crackling of their whips die away in the distance.
No jump kick could reach that far. That's
24
unrealistic.
June, before morning. Last night the Count left me early and locked himself into his own room. As soon as I dared, I ran up the winding stair and looked out of the window, which opened south. I thought I would walk
No.
for there is something going on.
I need to
The Zegany are
focus my
quartered
chi.
somewhere in the castle and are doing work of some kind. I know it, for now and then I hear a faraway muffled sound as of mattock and spade, and whatever it is, it must be the end of some ruthless villainy. I had been at the window somewhat less than half an hour when I saw something coming out of the Count's window.
He flash kicked me out of a teleport. A teleport is supposed to dodge a flash kick.
It was a new shock to me to find that he had on the suit of clothes which I had worn while traveling here, and slung over his shoulder the terrible bag which I had seen the women take away. There could be no doubt as to his quest, and in my garb, too. This, then, is his new scheme of evil. He will allow others to see me, as they think, so that he may both leave evidence that I have been seen in the towns or villages posting my own letters, and that any wickedness which he may do shall by the Lord be attributed to me. It makes me
jump kicked me out of a teleport.
And whilst I am shut up here, a veritable prisoner, but without that protection,
teleport away from anything.
Right and consolation. I thought I would watch for the Count's return, and for a long time sat doggedly at the window.
You have no idea how
then I
painful
began to
these
notice
matches
that there were some quaint little specks floating in the rays of the moonlight. They were like the tiniest grains of dust, and they whirled round and gathered in clusters in a nebulous sort of way. I watched them with a sense of soothing, and a sort of calm stole over me.
No more dolphins.
I leaned back in the embrasure in a more comfortable position, so that I could enjoy more fully the aerial gambling. Something made me start up, a low, piteous howling of dogs somewhere far below in the valley, which was hidden from my sight. Lower it seemed to ring in my ears, and the floating motes of dust to take new shapes to the sound as they danced in the moonlight. I felt myself struggling to awake to some call of my instincts. My very soul was struggling, and my half-remembered sensibilities were striving to answer the call.
But I'm pretty good with their cheap stuff, so let's see how I do.
Quicker and quicker danced the dust. The moonbeams seemed to quiver as they went by me into a mass of gloom beyond. More and more they gathered till they seemed to take dim phantom shapes. And then I started, broad awake and in full possession of my senses, and ran screaming from the place. The phantom shapes, which were becoming gradually materialized in the moonbeams, were those of the three ghostly women to whom I was doomed. I fled, and felt somewhat safer in my own room, where there was no moonlight,
That was an input error.
When a couple of hours had passed, I heard something stirring in the Count's room.
I'm so good against this person. Everyone complains that this JP guy, the guy with the screen, is like cheap and impossible to beat. But I'm actually good at cheating him.
With a beating heart, I tried the door, but I was locked in my prison and could do nothing. I sat down and simply cried.
I knew that one was
As
the
I
grab,
sat,
but
I heard a sound
I
in
kind
the
of
courtyard
landed into it, you know?
the agonized cry of a woman. I rushed to the window and, throwing it up, peered out between the bars. There indeed was a woman with disheveled hair, holding her hands over her heart as one distressed with running. She was leaning against the corner of the gateway. When she saw my face at the window, she threw herself forward and shouted in a voice laden with menace, "Monster! Give me my
My
child!"
Chun-Li is just
She
mid-platinum.
threw herself on
This
her
guy is
knees
destined for
and,
great
raising
things.
up her hands,
He's too good
cried
to be
the
in this
same
ring.
words in tones which wrung my heart. Then she tore her hair and beat her breast and abandoned herself to all the violences of extravagant
Stop
emotion.
grabbing me with your
Finally,
first
she
power.
threw herself forward, and though I could not see her, I could hear the beating of her naked hands against the door. Somewhere high overhead, probably on the tower, I heard the voice of the Count calling in his harsh metallic whisper. His call seemed to be answered from far and wide by the howling of wolves. Before many minutes had passed, a pack of them purred like a pent-up dam when liberated through the wide entrance. His call seemed to be answered
He just
from
knows
far
I'm a
and wide
sucker for
by
that
the
move. He
wolves.
just keeps grabbing
Before
me with
many
his
minutes
horse
had
power.
passed, a pack of them poured like a pent-up dam when liberated through the wide entrance into the courtyard. There was no cry from the woman, and the howling of wolves was but short.
Could
Before
I have
long,
just
they
pressed the
streamed
kick
away
button and won that
singing,
there?
licking their lips. I could not pity her, for I knew now what had become of her child, and she was better dead. What
I have not dodged that move a single time. You should just only use that
How
move.
can I escape from this dreadful thing of night and gloom and fear?
No man knows till he has suffered from the night how sweet and how dear to his heart and eye the morning can be. When the sun grew so high this morning that it struck the top of the great gateway opposite my window, the high spot which it touched seemed to me as if the dove from the ark had lighted there. My fear fell from me as if
I know I should jump out of that, but it hit me when I landed.
I must take action of some sort or prepared for the day is upon me.
And that's then I tried to do my level 2 critical art, just like phase through it, but I was too late.
Which is to blot out
Too
the
late to
traces
save
of my
myself with
existence
my
from the earth.
frantic button inputs.
Let me not think of it. Action. It has always been at nighttime that I have been molested or threatened, or in some way in danger or in fear. I have not yet seen
I think I'm just
count
gonna
in the
settle
daylight.
in on
Can
Kimberly
it be
for a
that he
while. I
sleeps
just
when
want
others
to
wake,
relax,
that he may be
be a
awake
ninja,
whilst they
and
sleep?
jump around
If I could only
like a
get into
ninja.
his
So,
room, there is no possible
no
way.
more of this
The door is
jumping
always
between
locked.
characters
No
nonsense.
way for me. Yet there
What happened?
is a way if one dares to take it. Where his
They
body
connected.
has gone,
There
why
you go.
may not another body go? I have seen him myself crawl from his window. Why should not I imitate him and go in by his window? The chances are desperate, but my need is more desperate still. I shall risk it. At the worst, it can only be death, and a man's death is not a cab's, and the dreaded hereafter may still
I
be
found
open
a
to me.
baseball.
God help me in my task. Goodbye, Mina, if I fail. Goodbye, my faithful friend and second father. Goodbye, all. And last of all, Mina. Same day later. I have made the effort, and, God helping me, have come safely back to this room. I must put down every detail in order. I went whilst my courage was fresh, straight to the window on the south side, and at once got outside on this side. The stones are big and roughly cut, and the mortar has by process of time been washed away between them. I took off my boots and ventured out on the desperate way. I looked down once, so as to make sure that a sudden glimpse of the awful depth would not overcome me, but after that kept my eyes away from it. I know pretty well the direction and distance of the Count's window, and made for it as well as I could, having regard to the opportunities available. I did not feel dizzy. I suppose I was too excited, and the time seemed ridiculously short till I found myself standing on the windowsill and trying to raise up the sash. I was filled with agitation, however, when I bent down and slid feet foremost into the window. Then I looked around for the Count, but, with surprise and gladness, made a discovery. The room was empty. It was barely
No.
furnished with odd
That was
things
supposed to be a
which seemed
combo
to have
with
never been
Stinky.
used. The furniture was something the same style as that in the south room,
Now
and
he's
was
doing all
covered
the
with
combos
dust.
and he's catching
I
up.
looked for the key, but it was not in the lock, and I could not find it anywhere. The only thing I found was a great heap of gold in one corner. Gold of
I
all
deserve to
kinds.
lose. Kill me.
Roman and British and Austrian and Bulgarian and Greek and Turkish
I had a
money,
chance, but then
covered with a
caught
film of
fireball
dust,
with the
as though it
face.
had laid long in the ground. None of it that I noticed was less than 300 years old. There were also chains and ornaments, some jeweled, but all of them old and stained. At one corner of the room was a heavy door. I
deserve
tried it,
that.
for since I could not find the key of the room or the key of the outer door, which was the main
Like
object
that.
of my
That's
search,
what I found.
I must make further examination, or all my efforts would be in vain. It was open and led through a stone passage to a circular stairway, which went steeply down. I descended, minding carefully where I went, for the stairs were dark, being only lit by loopholes in the heavy masonry. At the bottom there was a dark tunnel-like passage, through which came a deathly, sickly odor, the odor of old earth newly turned. As I went through the passage, the smell grew closer and heavier. At last, I pulled open a heavy door which stood ajar, and found myself in an old
Sometimes matches are easy
was
when they
evident-
just
which had
can't put up with
evidently
your
been lost as
nonsense.
great.
I did nothing there but
The roof was
nonsense.
broken, and in
couldn't
two
put up with
places
the
were
nonsense.
steps leading to vaults. For the ground had recently been dug over, and the earth placed in great wooden boxes, manifestly those which had been brought by the snow blast. There was nothing about, and I made a search
Saw
over
that
every
one
inch of
coming.
the ground so as not to lose a chance. I went down even into the vaults, where the dim light struggled, although to do so was a dread to my very soul. Into two these I went, but saw nothing except fragments of old coffins and piles of dust. In the third, however, I noticed Dracula. There, in one of the great boxes, of which there were 50 in all, on a pile of newly dug earth.
I don't think I can recover from this nonsense.
He was either dead or asleep. I could not say which,
Especially if I do
for
that.
the
I have a
eyes
chance to
were
hit him
open
with my
and
most
stony,
powerful move,
without
and there was an
glancing
input
at
error,
them.
and I did
And the
literally
cheeks
nothing.
had the warmth of life through all their pallor. The lips were as red as ever, but there was no sign of movement, no pulse, no breath, no beating of the heart. I bent over him and tried to find any sign of life, but in vain. He could not have lain there long, for the
Rematch
earthy
so
smell
fast. He's
had
like, I
passed
want the
away in
3
2
points.
hours. By the side of the box was its cover, pierced with holes here and there. I thought he might have the keys on him, but when I went to search, I saw the dead eyes, and in them, dead though they were, such a look of hate, though unconscious of me or my presence, that I fled from the place, and leaving the Count's room by the window, crawled again up the castle wall. Regaining my room, I threw myself panting upon the bed and tried to think.
That one. I knew that one was going to
Today is the date of my last letter, and the Count is taking steps to prove that it was genuine. For again I saw him leave the castle by the same window and in my clothes. As he went down the wall, lizard
Focus my
fashion, I
cheese.
wished I
This is
had
my
a gun
last
or
chance
some
to not
lethal weapon
humiliate
that I
him.
might destroy him.
This is like a
But I feared that no
lose
weapon wrought alone by man's hand would have any effect on him. I dared not wait to see him return, for I feared to see those weird sisters. I came back to the library and read there until I fell asleep. I was awakened by the Count, who looked at me as grimly as a man could look as he said, "Tomorrow, my friend, we must part. You return to your beautiful England, I to some work which may have such an end that
He's using
we
my
may never
nonsense
meet.
skills against me.
Your letter home has been dispatched. Tomorrow I shall not be here, but all shall be ready for your journey. In the morning come the Sagan, who have some labors of their own here, and
He's
also
got good
come the
reaction
slaves.
times.
When they have gone,
Oh,
my carriage shall come to you, and shall bear you to the Global Pass to meet the diligence from
I'm sticking
Bukavina
with
to
Kimberly for a little
Victor's.
while.
But I am in hopes that I
Can you
shall
hear
see more
Dracula?
of you at Castle Dracula. I suspected him and determined to test his sincerity. Sincerity. It seems like a profanation of the word to write it in connection with such a monster. So I asked him point blank, why may I not go tonight? And because, dear sir, my coachman and horses are away on a mission. But I would walk with pleasure. I want to get away at once. He smiled. Such a soft, smooth, diabolical smile that I knew there was some trick behind his smoothness. He said, "And your baggage?" "I do not care about it. I can send for it some other time." The Count stood up and said with a sweet courtesy which made me rub my eyes, it seemed so real, "You English have a saying which is close to my heart, for its spirit is that which rules our boyars. Welcome the coming, speed the parting guest. Come with me, my dear young friend. Not an hour shall you wait in my house against your will, though sad am I at your going, and that you so suddenly desire it. Come." With a stately gravity, he, with the lamp, preceded me down the stairs and along the hall. Suddenly, he stopped. Hark! Close at hand came the howling of many wolves. It was almost as if the sound sprang up at the rising of his hand, just as the music of a great orchestra seems to leap under the baton of the conductor. After a pause of a moment, he proceeded, in his stately way, to the door, drew back the ponderous bolts, unhooked the heavy chains, and began to draw it open. To my intense astonishment, I saw that it was unlocked. Suspiciously, I looked all around, but could see no key of any kind. As the door began to open, the howling of the wolves without grew louder and angrier. Their red jaws with champing teeth and their blunt-clawed feet as they leapt came in through the opening door. I knew then that to struggle at the moment against the Count was useless. With such allies as these at his command, I could do nothing. But still the door continued slowly to open,
Okay,
and
there we
only
go.
the Count's body stood in the gap. Suddenly, it struck me that this might be the moment and means of my doom. I was to be given to the wolves, and at my own instigation. There was a diabolical wickedness in the idea, great enough for the Count, and as a last chance I cried out, "Shut the door! I shall wait till morning," and covered my face with my hands to hide my tears of bitter disappointment. With one sweep of his powerful arm, the Count threw the door shut, and the great bolts clanged and echoed through the hall as they shot back into their places. In silence we returned to the library, and after a minute or two I went to my own room. The last I saw of Count Dracula was his kissing his hand to me, with a red light of triumph in his eyes, and with a smile that Judas in hell might be proud of. When I was in my room and about to lie down, I thought I heard a whispering at my door. I went to it softly and listened. Unless my ears deceived me, I heard the voice of the Count. Back to your own place. Your time is not yet come. Wait, have patience. Tonight is mine. Tomorrow night is yours. There was a low, sweet ripple of laughter, and in a rage I threw open the door and saw without the 3 terrible women licking their lips. As I appeared, they all joined in a horrible laugh and ran away. I came back to my room and threw myself on my knees. Is it then so near the end? Tomorrow, Lord, help me and those to whom I am dear. 30 June, morning. These may be the last words I ever write in this diary. I slept till just before the dawn, and when I woke, threw myself on my knees, for I determined that if death came, he should find me ready. At last I felt the subtle change in the air and knew that the morning had come. Then came the welcome cockcrow, and I felt that I was safe. With a glad heart, I opened the door and ran down to the hall. I had seen that the door was unlocked, and now escape was before me. With hands that trembled with eagerness, I unhooked the chains and drew back the massive bolts. But the door would not move. Despair seized me. I pulled and pulled at the door and shook it till, massive as it was, it rattled in its casement. I could see the bolt shot. It had been locked after I left the Count. Then a wild desire took me to obtain the key at any risk, and I determined then and there to scale the wall again and gain the Count's room. He might kill me, but death now seemed the happier choice of evils. Without a pause, I rushed up to the east window and scrambled down the wall, as before, into the Count's room. It was empty, but that was as I expected. I could not see a key anywhere, but the heap of gold remained. I went through the door in the corner and down the winding stair and along the dark passage to the old chapel. I knew now well enough where to find the monster I sought. The great box was in the same place, close against the wall, but the lid was laid on it, not fastened down, but with the nails ready in their places to be hammered home. I knew I must reach the bottom of the key, so I raised the lid and laid it back against the wall. And then I saw something which filled my very soul with horror. There lay the Count, but looking as if his youth had been half renewed, for the white hair and mustache were changed to dark iron gray. The cheeks were fuller, and the white skin seemed ruby red underneath. The mouth was redder than ever, for on the lips were gouts of fresh blood, which trickled from the corners of the mouth and ran over the chin and neck. Even the deep, burning eyes seemed set amongst swollen flesh, for the lids and pouches underneath were bloated. It seemed as if the whole awful creature were simply gorged with blood. He lay like a filthy leech, exhausted with his repletion. I shuddered as I bent over to touch him, and every sense in me revolted at the contact. But I had to search, or I was lost. The coming night might see my own body a banquet in a similar way to those horrid 3. I felt all over the body, but no sign could I find of the key. Then I stopped and looked at the Count. There was a mocking smile on the bloated face which seemed to drive me mad. This was the being I was helping to transfer to London, where perhaps For centuries to come, he might, amongst its teeming millions, satiate his lust for blood and create a new and ever-widening circle of semi-demons to batten on the helpless. The very thought drove me mad. A terrible desire came upon me to rid the world of such a monster. There was no lethal weapon at hand, but I seized a shovel which the workmen had been using to fill the cases, and lifting it high, struck with the edge downward at the hateful face. But as I did so, the head turned, and the eyes fell upon me with all their blaze of basilisk horror. The sight seemed to paralyze me, and the shovel turned in my hand and glanced from the face, merely making a deep gash above the forehead. The shovel fell from my hand across the box, and as I pulled it away, the flange of the blade caught the edge of the lid, which fell over again and hid the horrid thing from my sight. The last glimpse I had was of the bloated face, blood-stained and fixed with a grin of malice which would have held its own in the nethermost hell. I thought and thought what should be my next move, but my brain seemed on fire, and I waited with a despairing feeling growing over me. As I waited, I heard in the distance a gypsy song sung by merry voices coming closer, and through their song the rolling of heavy wheels and the cracking of whips. The Zegany and the Slovaks of whom the Count had spoken were coming. With a last look around and at the box which contained the vile body, I ran from the place and gained the Count's room, determined to rush out at the moment the door should be opened. With strained ears I listened and heard downstairs the grinding of the key in the great lock and the falling back of the heavy door. There must have been some other means of entry, or someone had a key for one of the locked doors. Then there came the sound of many feet tramping and dying away in some passage, which sent up a clanging echo. I turned to run down again towards the vault, where I might find a new entrance. But at the moment there seemed to come a violent puff of wind, and the door to the winding stair blew to with a shock that set the dust on the lintels flying. When I ran to push it open, I found it was hopelessly fast. I was again a prisoner, and the net of doom was closing round me more closely. As I write, there is in the passage below a sound of many stamping feet, and the crash of weights being set down heavily, doubtless the boxes with their freight of earth. There is a sound of hammering. It is the box being nailed down. Now I can hear the heavy feet tramping again along the hall, with many other idle feet coming behind them. The door is shut. The chains rattle. There is a grinding of the key in the lock. I can hear the key withdrawn. Then another door opens and shuts. I hear the creaking of lock and bolt. Hark! In the courtyard and down the rocky way, the roll of heavy wheels, the crack of whips, and the chorus of the Zegany as they pass into the distance. I am alone in the castle with those awful women. Foul! Mina is a woman, and there is naught in common. They are devils of the pit. I shall not remain alone with them. I shall try to scale the castle wall farther than I have yet attempted. I shall take some of the gold with me, lest I want it later. I may find a way from this dreadful place. And then, away for home, away to the quickest and nearest train, away from the cursed spot, from this cursed land, where the devil and his children still walk with earthly feet. At least God's mercy is better than that of these monsters, and the precipice is steep and high. At its foot, a man may sleep as a man. Goodbye, all. Mina. And that concludes Jonathan Harker's journal entry. Tomorrow we hear from new voices, and we'll see if we learn whether Jonathan Harker, or I wonder at which point we'll learn if Jonathan Harker's attempt to escape from Castle Dracula was successful or not. We'll find out eventually. I actually haven't read beyond where we're at now, so I really don't know if he's going to make it out alive or not. We'll see. We'll see what happens next. So thank you very much for joining me today. I look forward to joining you tomorrow for more of Dracula by Bram Stoker. Thank you very much. Bye.
Hey friends! I can't tell if this is going live or not. I'm going to assume it is. This is not my best technical day. However, I think we just went live. Okay, so hi, I'm Christina, the manager at the Pacific Beach Library. We are reading day 5 of Dracula, and of course, this is a very spooky story about crazy and supernatural kind of things, which could perhaps explain why. Could the vampires have something to do with why I had my phone short out on me twice today and we had to go to a whole nother different kind of technology? Perhaps. Let's blame the vampires. So, again, if you were with me for the earlier 2 attempts, I do apologize. I don't know what's going on. Again, we'll try to fix it and get it better by next week. But in the meantime, we'll continue with our story. And thank you again for bearing with me. So, to recap, for those who have, in case you haven't already seen this twice, I apologize if you have. Hi, I'm Christina. We're about to read chapter 5 of Dracula. Today I'm drinking a Darjeeling tea. It came from the Shakespeare tea shop on India Street. It's lovely. Okay. And I do want to sip because it really is lovely. Yummy. I hope that we don't lose our connection yet again, but if we do, it's not a terrible thing, I guess. I get to have a nice sip of tea each time to start out. So, one more time. Today we are going to read chapter 5, but before that, let's discuss a little bit about chapter 4. Chapter 4 covers about a month and a half of action. It is Jonathan Harker's journal entries written in shorthand, which doesn't sound like a new thing to us because shorthand is not a very commonly used type of script nowadays, but at the time that this book was published in 1897, shorthand was a relatively new invention. And so the idea is that Jonathan Harker is able to write these notes about what's happening in Castle Dracula, and you can pretty safely assume that Count Dracula, even if you were to go through his things, is not going to be able to read it. And so that's why he can be pretty forthright in his journals about what's there. By the way, I saw a note from Adrienne that shows my phone is okay. I do too, although if it's not, maybe it's an excuse to buy a new phone. It's not a terrible thing. Let's see. Okay, so chapter 4 starts out with Jonathan Harker waking up alone in his bed. The Count Dracula has brought him up to his bedroom and undressed him. Again, these are kind of the there's some interesting elements to the book too. It is interesting. I was actually just doing a video about this book for Banned Book Week, and because next week is the week where libraries celebrate everyone's freedom to read and make their own decisions about what books are good books, what books are not books that they agree with, or that they find to be of literary merit, or that can form their own opinions, their learned opinions based on being able to have the opportunity to read something for themselves and make up their own minds. And so Dracula, it's really interesting. Even though Dracula was published in 1897, there was actually a challenge made against the book in 1994. So 97 years after publication, the book was taken off of a reading list for schools in Texas. And part of it was because some of this sort of sexual imagery. And I think that in chapter 3 is where we get some of that, especially too, with those women who are with Jonathan Harker. And then again here too, where the Count is undressing him. So it doesn't say that anything too untoward is happening, other than blood sucking perhaps. But that perhaps could be some of the controversy around Dracula. Which again, I kind of think pales next to the whole blood sucking thing. But, to each their own, everyone makes their own decisions about books. And that is the freedom to read. Let's see. So in this chapter, chapter 4, he starts out and he acknowledges at the end of the first journal entry that even though he's been afraid to be in the room where he is staying at Castle Dracula, he now feels it to be so much safer and indeed a sanctuary compared to where he was with the 3 mysterious women who he describes as waiting to suck my blood. So he now is convinced that these women, who again he might have at first viewed in a sexual light, are now a menace to his safety. As the chapter goes on, there's some bits about how the Count had Jonathan Harker write some letters that were post-dated. We later see that the Count leaves Castle Dracula dressed up in the clothing that Jonathan Harker originally wore when he arrived, and that he delivers the letters in that clothing. And the idea that Jonathan Harker has is that the Count is trying to make it look that Jonathan Harker is still out and about, that he is himself delivering his own letters. And then also, if Count Dracula is abducting more children or killing people or whatever it was, that, whatever evil he is doing in the towns, by wearing the clothing of Jonathan Harker, he might be passing suspicion onto Jonathan instead of onto himself. And so that is happening in the chapter. Also, too, there's a bit in there where some workmen deliver boxes, some crates to the castle. And it doesn't directly say what it is they're doing. They seem to be doing something with dirt. They're shoveling things. Then later on, there are some sekeli, I think they were called. The gypsies. They come by and Jonathan Harker tries to bribe them to take one of his letters, but they actually end up turning the letters back over to the Count. So the Count knows now that Jonathan Harker was trying to communicate with the outside world, is not pleased. There were 50 boxes. Eventually Jonathan Harker decides he cannot stand being a prisoner in this way anymore, and he decides to investigate. Because so many of the doors in the castle are locked, he decides the best way to investigate to get into the Count's room, because in the daylight the Count never comes out, so he assumes he's in his room resting. Jonathan Harker decides that he too will climb like a lizard along the outside walls of the castle. So he climbs outside from his room up to the room of Count Dracula, and he goes inside. He goes down some steps, and eventually he finds the 50 boxes filled with earth, filled with sand or dirt, and in one of them there is the Count Dracula is lying, and he seems to be not dead but not quite fully alive, and it's in a weird state. Eventually in the chapter, Count Dracula says he will be leaving soon, and he will arrange for passage for Jonathan Harker on the following day. But Jonathan Harker is concerned that it's not true, because when he listens outside of his door, he thinks he hears Count Dracula telling the women that tonight is mine, but tomorrow night is yours, and basically that they can have Jonathan Harker after the Count leaves. And so Jonathan Harker, when he wakes up on the morning of the 30th, he's petrified. He's convinced that this is his last day. And what he does is he gets back, he tries to, he climbs again to the room of Count Dracula, and when he goes there, he tries to kill him. But then the Count seems to somehow stop him, to compel him not to, and he is frightened and he runs away. When he runs away, the door locks behind, and he is unable to get back down to the Count. Then the workmen come, they take away the boxes, they take away the box, including the one that contained Count Dracula, and he is locked, and he's left alone. And he is afraid of being alone with those women, and he's thinking there has to be some way. I think I can get out of here. I'm going to try one more time. I'm going to take some of the gold that I found in Count Dracula's room, and I'm going to do my best to escape, and to die in the attempt would be better than to stay here. And so where his journal entry ends, we don't know what's going to happen next, because Jonathan Harker is going to do his best to escape. All right, now we get to start chapter 5. Thank you again for bearing with me through all of our technical difficulties today. Today is chapter 5. It is entitled Letter from Miss Mina Murray to Miss Lucy Westenra. And again, where we left off in the narrative was on June the 30th. This is going to be from the perspective of some other characters, and as I did before, I'll go ahead and draw a line with my hand to separate the different entries within this chapter. Okay, so I'll start out with chapter 5. 9 May, my dearest Lucy. Forgive my long delay in writing, but I have been simply overwhelmed with work. The life of an assistant schoolmistress is sometimes trying. I am longing to be with you, and by the sea, where we can talk together freely and build our castles of the air. I have been working very hard lately, because I want to keep up with Jonathan's studies, and I have been practicing shorthand very assiduously. When we are married, I shall be able to be useful to Jonathan, and if I can stenograph well enough, I can take down what he wants to say in this way and write it out for him on the typewriter, at which also I am practicing very hard. He and I sometimes write letters in shorthand, and he is keeping a stenographic journal of his travels abroad. When I am with you, I shall keep a diary in the same way. I don't mean one of those 2 pages to the week with Sunday squeezed in a corner diaries, but a sort of journal which I can write in whenever I feel inclined. I do not suppose there will be much of interest to other people, but it is not intended for them. I may show it to Jonathan some day if there is in it anything worth sharing. but it is really an exercise book. I shall try to do what I see lady journalists do, interviewing and writing descriptions and trying to remember conversations. I am told that, with a little practice, one can remember all that goes on or that one hears said during a day. However, we shall see. I will tell you of my little plans when we meet. I have just had a few hurried lines from Jonathan from Transylvania. He is well and will be returning in about a week. I am longing to hear all his news. It must be so nice to see strange countries. I wonder if we, I mean Jonathan and I, shall ever see them together. There is the 10 o'clock bell ringing. Goodbye, your loving Nina. Tell me all the news when you write. You have not told me anything for a long time. I hear rumors, and especially of a tall, handsome, curly-haired man. And there's 3 question marks. Letter. Lucy Westenra to Mina Murray. 17 Chatham Street, Wednesday. My dearest Mina, I must say you tax me very unfairly with being a bad correspondent. I wrote you twice since we parted, and your last letter was only your second. Besides, I have nothing to tell you. There is really nothing to interest you. Town is very pleasant just now. We go on a great deal to picture galleries and for walks and rides in the park. As to the tall, curly-haired man, I suppose it was the one who was with me at the last pop. Someone has evidently been telling tales. That was Mr. Homewood. He often comes to see us, and he and Mama get on very well together. They have so many things to talk about in common. We met some time ago a man that would just do for you, if you were not already engaged to Jonathan. He is an excellent parti, being handsome, well off, and of good birth. He is a doctor, and really clever. Just fancy! He is only 9 and 20, and he has an immense lunatic asylum all under his own care. Mr. Homewood introduced him to me, and he called here to see us, and often comes now. I think he is one of the most resolute men I ever saw, and yet the most calm. He seems absolutely imperturbable. I can fancy what a wonderful power he must have over his patients. He has a curious habit of looking one straight in the face, as if trying to read one's thoughts. He tries this on very much with me, but I flatter myself that he has got a tough nut to crack. I know that from my glass. Do you ever try to read your own face? I do, and I can tell you it is not a bad study and gives you more trouble than you can well fancy if you have never tried it. He says that I afford him a curious psychological study, and I humbly think I do. I do not, as you know, take sufficient interest in dress to be able to describe the new fashions. Dress is a bore. That is slang again, but never mind. Arthur says that every day. There, it is all out. Mina, we have told all our secrets to each other since we were children. We have slept together and eaten together and laughed and cried together. And now, though I have spoken, I would like to speak more. Oh, Mina, couldn't you guess? I love him. I am blushing as I write, for although I think he loves me, he has not told me so in words. But oh, Mina, I love him. I love him. There, that does me good. I wish I were with you, dear, sitting by the fire undressing, as we used to sit, and I would try to tell you what I feel. I do not know how I am writing this even to you. I'm afraid to stop, or I should tear up the letter, and I don't want to stop, for I do so want to tell you all. Let me hear from you at once, and tell me all that you think about it. Mina, I must stop. Good night. Bless me in your prayers, and Mina, pray for my happiness. Lucy. P.S. I need not tell you this is a secret. Good night again. L. Letter. Lucy Westenra to Mina Murray, 24 May. My dearest Mina, thanks and thanks again for your sweet letter. It was so nice to be able to tell you and to have your sympathy. My dear, it never pours, but it rains. How true the old proverbs are. Here I am, who shall be 20 in September, and yet I never had a proposal till today. Not a real proposal, and today I have had 3. Just fancy! 3 proposals in one day! Isn't it awful? I feel sorry, really and truly sorry for 2 of the poor fellows. Oh, Nina, I am so happy that I don't know what to do with myself. And 3 proposals! But for goodness sake, don't tell any of the girls or they would be getting all sorts of extravagant ideas and imagining themselves injured and slightest if in their very first day at home they did not get sick, at least. Some girls are so vain. You and I, Mina dear, who are engaged and are going to settle down soon soberly into old married women, can despise vanity. Well, I must tell you about the 3, but you must keep it a secret, dear, from everyone. Except, of course, Jonathan. You will tell him, because I would, if I were in your place, certainly tell Arthur. A woman ought to tell her husband everything, don't you think so, dear? And I must be fair. Men like women, certainly their wives, to be quite as fair as they are. And women, I'm afraid, are not always quite as fair as they should be. Well, my dear, number 1 came just before lunch. I told you of him, Dr. John Seward, the lunatic asylum man with the strong jaw and the good forehead. He was very cool outwardly, but was nervous all the same. He had evidently been schooling himself as to all sorts of little things, and remembered them. But he almost managed to sit down on his silk hat, which men don't generally do when they are cool, and then when he wanted to appear at ease, he kept playing with a lancet in a way that made me nearly scream. He spoke to me, Mina, very straightforwardly. He told me how dear I was to him, though he had known me so little, and what his life would be with me to help and cheer him. He was going to tell me how unhappy he would be if I did not care for him, but when he saw me cry, he said he was a brute and would not add to my present trouble. Then he broke off and asked if I could love him in time, and when I shook my head, his hands trembled. And then with some hesitation, he asked me if I cared already for anyone else. He put it very nicely, saying that he did not want to wring my confidence from me, but only to know, because if a woman's heart was free, a man might have hope. And then, Mina, I felt a sort of duty to tell him that there was someone. I only told him that much, and then he stood up, and he looked very strong and very grave as he took both my hands in his, and said he hoped I would be happy, and that if I ever wanted a friend, I must count him one of my best. Oh, Mina dear, I can't help crying, and you must excuse this letter being all blotted. Being proposed to is all very nice, and all that sort of thing, but it isn't at all a happy thing when you have to see a poor fellow, whom you know loves you honestly, going away and looking all broken-hearted. And to know that, no matter what he may say at the moment, you are passing quite out of his life. My dear, I must stop here at present. I feel so miserable, though I am so happy. Evening. Arthur has just gone, and I feel in better spirits than when I left off, so I can go on telling you about the day. Well, my dear, number 2 came after lunch. He was such a nice fellow, an American from Texas, and he looked so young and fresh that it seems almost impossible that he has been to so many places and has had such adventures. I sympathize with poor Desdemona when she had such a dangerous stream poured in her ear, even by a black man. I suppose that we women are such cowards that we think a man will save us from tears, and we marry him. I know now what I would do if I were a man and wanted to make a girl love me. No, I don't, for there was Mr. Morris telling us his stories, and Arthur never told any, and yet, my dear, I am somewhat previous. Mr. Quincy P. Morris found me alone. It seems that a man always does find a girl alone. No, he doesn't, for Arthur tried twice to make a chance, and I helping him all I could. I am not ashamed to say it now. I must tell you beforehand that Mr. Morris doesn't always speak slang. That is to say, he never does so to strangers or before them, for he is really well educated and has exquisite manners. But he found out that it amused me to hear him talk American slang, and whenever I was present and there was no one to be shocked, he said such funny things. I am afraid, my dear, he has to invent it all, for it fits exactly into whatever else he has to say. But this is a way slang has. I do not know myself if I shall ever speak slang. I do not know if Arthur likes it, as I have never heard him use any as yet. Well, Mr. Morris sat down beside me and looked as happy and jolly as he could, but I could see all the same that he was very nervous. he took my hand in his and said ever so sweetly, "Miss Lucy, I know I ain't good enough to regulate the fixins of your little shoes, but I guess if you wait till you find a man that is, you will go join them 7 young women with the lamps when you quit. Won't you just hitch up alongside of me and let us go down the long road together, driving in double harness?" Well, he did look so good-humored and so jolly that it didn't seem half so hard to refuse him as it did poor Dr. Seward. So I said, as lightly as I could, that I did not know anything of hitching, and that I wasn't broken to harness at all yet. Then he said that he had spoken in a light manner, and he hoped that if he had made a mistake in doing so on so grave a momentous an occasion for him, I would forgive him. He really did look serious when he was saying it, and I couldn't help feeling a bit serious too. I know, Mina, you will think me a horrid flirt, though I couldn't help feeling a sort of exultation that he was a number 2 in the day. And then, my dear, before I could say a word, he began pouring out a perfect torrent of love-making, laying his very heart and soul at my feet. He looked so earnest over it that I shall never again think that a man must be playful always, and never earnest, because he is merry at times. I suppose he saw something in my face which checked him, for he suddenly stopped, and said with a sort of manly fervor that I could have loved him for if I had been free, "Lucy, you are an honest-hearted girl, I know. I should not be here speaking to you as I am now if I did not believe you clean grit, right through to the very depths of your soul. Tell me, like one good fellow to another, is there anyone else that you care for? And if there is, I'll never trouble you a hair's breadth again, but will be, if you will let me, a very faithful friend." My dear Mina, why are men so noble when we women are so little worthy of them? Here was I almost making fun of this great-hearted, true gentleman. I burst into tears. I am afraid, my dear, you will think this a very sloppy letter in more ways than one, and I really felt very badly. Why can't they let a girl marry 3 men, or as many as want her, and save all this trouble? But this is heresy, and I must not say it. I am glad to say that, though I was crying, I was able to look into Mr. Morris's brave eyes, and I told him out straight. Yes, there is someone I love, though he has not told me yet that he loves me. I was right to speak to him so frankly, for quite a light came into his face, and he put out both his hands and took mine. I think I put them into his, and said in a hearty way, "That's my brave girl. It's better worth being late for a chance of winning you than being in time for any other girl in the world. Don't cry, my dear. If it's for me, I'm a hard nut to crack, and I take it standing up. If that other fellow doesn't know his happiness, well, he better look for it soon or he'll have to deal with me. Little girl, your honesty and pluck have made me a friend, and that's rarer than a lover. It's more unselfish anyhow. My dear, I'm going to have a pretty lonely walk between this and Kingdom Come. Won't you give me one kiss? It'll be something to keep off the darkness now and then. You can, you know, if you like. For that other good fellow, he must be a good fellow, my dear, and a fine fellow or you could not love him. He hasn't spoken yet." That quite won me, Mina, for it was brave and sweet of him, and noble too, to a rival, wasn't it? And he so sad. So I leant over and kissed him. He stood up with my 2 hands in his, and as he looked down into my face, I'm afraid I was blushing very much. He said, "Little girl, I hold your hand, and you've kissed me. And if these things don't make us friends, nothing ever will. Thank you for your sweet honesty to me, and goodbye." He wrung my hand, and taking up his hat, went straight out of the room without looking back, without a tear, or a quiver, or a pause. And I, crying like a baby. Oh, why must a man like that be made unhappy when there are lots of girls about who would worship the very ground he trod on? I know I would if I were free, only I don't want to be free. My dear, this quite upset me, and I feel I cannot write of happiness just at once, after telling you of it, and I don't wish to tell you of the number 3 until it can be all happy. Ever your loving, Lucy. P.S. Oh, about number 3? I needn't tell you of number 3, need I? Besides, it was all so confused. It seemed only a moment from his coming into the room till both his arms were round me and he was kissing me. I am very, very happy, and I don't know what I have done to deserve it. I must only try in the future to show that I am not ungrateful to God for all his goodness to me in sending to me such a lover, such a husband, and such a friend. Goodbye. Dr. Seward's diary, kept in phonograph. 25 May. Ebb tide in appetite today. Cannot eat, cannot rest, so diary instead. Since my rebuff of yesterday, I have a sort of empty feeling. Nothing in the world seems of sufficient importance to be worth the doing. As I knew that the only cure for this sort of thing was work, I went amongst the patients. I picked out one who's afforded me a study of much interest. He is so quaint that I am determined to understand him as well as I can. Today I seem to get nearer than ever before to the heart of his mystery. I questioned him more fully than I have ever done, with a view to making myself master of the facts of his hallucination. In my manner of doing it there was, I now see, something of cruelty. I seemed to wish to keep him to the point of madness, a thing which I avoid with the patients as I would the mouth of hell. Memo. Under what circumstances would I not avoid the pit of hell? Omnia Romae venalia sunt. Hell has its price. Verb, sap. If there be anything behind this instinct, it will be valuable to trace it afterwards accurately, so I had better commence to do so. Therefore, R.M.
5012 AD.
Etat 59.
The year mankind's glorious history came to a sudden and
morbidly
abrupt end,
excitable. Periods of
when the
gloom,
world was
ending
invaded
in
by
some
aliens
fixed idea
from
which I
beyond the
cannot make
stars.
out. I
The
presume
aliens
that the
unleashed a
sanguine
new
temperament
breed of
itself
weapon,
and the disturbing
machine-like
influence
forms
end in a
that all but
mentally
annihilated
accomplished
human
finish.
civilization.
A possibly dangerous man,
The handful of
possibly
survivors that
dangerous,
remained
if
fled from
unselfish.
Earth, seeking refuge on the
In
moon.
selfish men, caution is as secure an armor for their
5204
foes as for
AD.
themselves. What I think of on this point
Humanity
is,
launched
when
its
fixed
counterattack, deploying an army of
What I think
androids
of
from a network
on
of
this
orbiting
point
bases.
is, when self is the fixed point, the
But after
centripetal
more
force
than
is
a
balanced
dozen
with
large-scale
the centrifugal.
descents upon the enemy,
When duty, a
we
cause,
still haven't
etc.,
managed
is
to
the fixed
repel
point,
the invaders.
the latter force is paramount, and only
That is
accident or
why
a
you,
series of
your
accidents
hub
can
forces,
balance it.
exist. To break this
Letter.
stalemate, once
Quincy P.
and for
Morris
all,
to Honorable Arthur
you
Holmwood,
are our ultimate
25
weapon,
May.
and you must
My
put an
dear
end
Art,
to this war.
we've told yarns by the
Understood,
campfire
sir.
in the prairies, and dressed one another's
wish
wounds
you
after
good
trying a
hunting.
landing at the Marquesas.
Glory
and
to
drunk healths on
mankind.
the shore of Titicaca.
Glory.
There are more yarns to be told, another wound to
Glory
be healed, and another
to
health to be drunk.
mankind.
Won't you let this be at my campfire tomorrow night? I have no hesitation in asking you, as I know a certain lady is engaged to a certain dinner party, and that you are free. There will only be one other, our old pal at the Korea, Jack Seward. He's coming too, and we both want to mingle our weeps over the wine cup, and to drink a health with all our hearts to the happiest man in all the wide world, who has won the noblest heart that God has made, and best worth winning. We promise you a hearty welcome, and a loving greeting, and a health as true as your own right hand. We shall both swear to leave you at home if you drink too deep to a certain pair of eyes. Come. Yours as ever and always, Quincy P. Morris. Telegram from Arthur Holmwood to Quincy P. Morris. 26 May. Count me in every time. I bear messages which will make both your ears tingle. Art. And that concludes chapter 5, our first week. So we're learning a bit about Nina, the fiancée of Jonathan Harker, and her good friend Lucy. And apparently the three men that all proposed to Lucy in the same day all know each other and are about to go out for drinks. So we'll see what happens in the next chapter. Thank you for joining me for this first week of our read-along together of Dracula by Bram Stoker, and I'll see you next time. Thank you very much. Bye. Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Christina, the manager of the Pacific Beach Library. Thank you for joining me for week 2 and day 6 of our read-along together of Dracula by Bram Stoker. Let's see. I thought we would celebrate not only that we are enjoying our new book together, but also I have a personal milestone. I am celebrating today 21 years of happy employment with the city of San Diego as a librarian. And so, because if 21 years of employment was like 21 years of life, which it is, right? it means that I should legally be able to drink on the job.
Hello.
Tea.
All
To
right.
drink tea
Are we good
on the
now?
job. So I celebrated by buying
Okay.
myself a brand new
Settings
teapot.
should all be good to
Isn't
go.
it pretty? I
Hold
got
on.
it for anyone who's local and is interested in
self-destruct permissions
teapots.
are missing.
I got it at the Marukai
Wait a
market.
sec,
They
we
had
need to
a
restore
lovely
those.
assortment. And today's tea is
I
a
could set it
fresh
for you,
chamomile.
but you should
or by
probably
fresh,
do
I
it
mean,
yourself.
chamomile
Regulations and all, you
dried
know.
chamomile blossoms. I made some chamomile ice cream this weekend. It came out okay. I think I can do better by
Wait,
changing the
no,
recipe.
you need to leave that turned
Congratulations,
on.
I appreciate it. And so I bought the dried chamomile at the market, so I could use it for the ice cream. And then I was like, well, I'm
Okay,
gonna have
good.
it in my tea also.
If things go
So
wrong
just
during an
a
op,
lovely
you may
little
have to
celebratory
sacrifice
tea.
yourself in order to finish it. So, once you're finished making adjustments, you can go ahead and close this out.
Delicious, as it should be. But yeah, I do enjoy the clear teapot and everything, just because I think it's, especially when I'm doing something loose leaf. I used to be worried in the beginning that did I put enough tea? Did I put too much
Morning.
tea? Is it gonna get the proper amount of steeping? And so I do like the clear ones because then I can actually see the color of it. And plus too, the tea is just so beautiful. Most of my teacups at home are they're an opaque kind of thing.
The commander's
they're
put me in
ceramic
charge of your
or something
maintenance,
like that.
ma'am.
And so
That means
I
I'll be
don't- I can
performing
see the
regular
color from the
checks on
top,
you
but
from
I can't
now
get
on.
to see the color shining through it. And so I do actually like having this clear
Oh,
set
don't
to read
worry.
together when I
We
read together with
9S
you to be
models
able
are
to
the
enjoy it
best
that way
around, you
also.
know.
So thank you very much
Though I
everybody for
suppose
joining
we're
me
not
today.
exactly
It is,
known for our
It's
modesty.
funny. 20-something years in, I finally came up with this thing of doing the read-alouds together, and I
9S.
love it. I started out as a children's librarian,
What is it, ma'am?
and I
Stop
love doing the
calling
story
me
times
ma'am.
with the kids.
Huh?
And so thank you for giving me this opportunity to do story times
There's
with
no
grown-ups
need to be
also.
so
I
formal.
really enjoy it.
All right.
So,
If you say so.
let's talk a little bit about what we read together on Friday.
Oh,
and then
I
we'll get
almost
into
forgot.
today's reading.
The commander was
Friday
calling
was a short
for you.
chapter.
We better go see what's
had
up, ma'am.
ended the previous day on
2B.
Thursday with chapter 4, where we had read 4 days of Jonathan Harker's journal. And it had actually ended on June 30th. On Friday, though, we got a total change of pace. We switched over to different voices. We switched over to a letter from Miss Mina Murray to her good friend Miss Lucy Westenra. Mina we'd heard previously referred to as the fiancée of Jonathan Harker, and the first letter in that chapter from Mina to Lucy was dated May the 9th. So almost 2 months prior to the conclusion of prior to the action depicted at the conclusion of chapter 4. And so when Jonathan had just gone to Transylvania, and she didn't really know much about what was going on there. What we discover is that Mina has written her good friend Lucy, and she's asking like, what's going on? I heard there's some suitor. And then Lucy writes back, and she basically says, you know, actually
You need
I
to
have
be near an
3
access point to
suitors right
save your
now.
data.
And she
You can
tells
see access
Mina
points
about
on the
3
close
of
range
them.
map.
And
Be
interestingly
sure to
enough,
save
all 3
often.
of them propose to Lucy. And she, the three men are Dr. Seward, who runs a lunatic asylum located next door to where I believe where Count Dracula is about to have his house. He talks, by the way, too, about one of his patients, a Mr. Renfield, who is an interesting man. And she also talks about a gentleman named Quincy Morris, who is an American and who, if I can keep it up and remember, he's going to be kind of a cowboy accent kind of thing in my read aloud, just because I find him amusing that way. I love this. I'm sorry, I skipped ahead. I see a line about, we've told yarns by the
Maintenance
campfire
finished?
in the prairies.
Yes, Commander.
Total cowboy.
You detonated
And so,
your black box
he's-
in order to
he's one of
defeat
the
the
gentlemen
enemy.
who
Bold,
proposed to Lucy,
but
but she
risky.
declined him.
Try not to
because
be
her
so
heart was
reckless
engaged
next time.
elsewhere.
Understood.
And the implication
I know
is
you're
that
fresh out of
the gentleman
maintenance,
who
but I
she
have another
is in
mission
love
for
with
you.
is a man named
I need you to
Arthur
head to the
Holmwood,
surface.
who
Rendezvous
is
with the
also a
resistance and
friend
do some
of
recon.
Dr.
Doesn't
Seward
Yorha
and
have a
Quincy
dedicated
Morris.
resistance
And so
contact
the chapter
already?
5 ended
We haven't been
with,
able to get in touch
Quincy
with
inviting
them,
Arthur
so we'll
to
need you to look
dinner
into
with their
that
good
as well.
friend Jack
Understood.
Seward, and they're going to talk with each other and share messages that will make both your ears tingle. And so now let's go ahead and read chapter 6 and see if it makes our ears tingle. All right, let's go in and read chapter 6 together. It is entitled Mina Murray's Journal. 24 July, Whitby. Lucy met me at the station, looking sweeter and lovelier than ever, and we drove up to the house at the Crescent in which they have rooms. This is a lovely place. The little river, the Esk, runs through a deep valley which broadens out as it comes near the harbor. A great viaduct runs across with high piers, through which the view seems somehow further away than it really is. The valley is beautifully green, and it is so steep that when you're on the high land on either side, you look right across it until you are near enough to see down. The houses of the old town, the side away from us, are all red-roofed and seem piled up one over the other anyhow, like the pictures we see of Nuremberg. Right over the town is the ruin of Whitby Abbey, which was sacked by the Danes, and which is the scene of part of Marmion, where the girl was built up in the wall. It is a most noble ruin, of immense size, and full of beautiful and romantic bits. There is a legend that a white lady is seen in one of the windows. Between it and the town there is another church, the parish one, round which is a big graveyard, all full of tombstones. This is to my mind the nicest spot in Whitby, for it lies right over the town and has a full view of the harbor and all of the bay to where the headland called Kettleness stretches out into the sea. It descends so steeply over the harbor that part of the bank has fallen away and some of the graves have been destroyed. In one place part of the stonework of the graves stretches out over the sandy pathway far below. There are walks, with seats beside them, through the churchyard, and people go and sit there all day long, looking at the beautiful view and enjoying the breeze. I shall come and sit here very often myself and work. Indeed, I am writing now, with my book on my knee, and listening to the talk of 3 old men who are sitting beside me. They seem to do nothing all day, but sit up here and talk. The harbor lies below me, with, on the far side, one long granite wall stretching out into the sea, with a curve outwards at the end of it, in the middle of which is a lighthouse. A heavy sea-wall runs along outside of it. On the near side, the sea-wall makes an elbow crooked inversely, and its end too has a lighthouse. Between the 2 piers, there is a narrow opening into the harbor, which then suddenly widens. It is nice at high water, but when the tide is out, it shoals away to nothing, and there is merely the stream of the Esk running between banks of sand, with rocks here and there. Outside the harbor on this side, there rises for about half a mile a great reef, the sharp edge of which runs straight out from behind the south lighthouse. At the end of it is a buoy with a bell, which swings in bad weather and sends in a mournful sound on the wind. They have a legend here that when a ship is lost, bells are heard out at sea. I must ask the old man about this. He is coming this way. He is a funny old man. He must be awfully old, for his face is all gnarled and twisted like the bark of a tree. He tells me that he is nearly 100, and that he was a sailor in the Greenland fishing fleet when Waterloo was fought. He is, I am afraid, a very skeptical person, for when I asked him about the bells at sea and the white lady at the abbey, he said very brusquely, "I won't fash mysel' about them, miss. Them things be all worn out. Mind, I don't say that they never was, but I do say that they wasn't in my time. They be all very well for cummers and trippers and the like, but not for a nice young lady like you. Them feet folks from York and Leeds that be always eatin' cured herrings and drinkin' tea and lookin' out to buy cheap jet would creed aught. I wonder mysel' who'd be botherin' tellin' lies to them, even the newspapers, which is full of fool talk. I thought he would be a good person to learn interesting things from,
The surface?
so I asked him if he would mind telling me something about the whale fishing in the old days. He was just
Usually
settling
we can't
himself
get
to
near
begin
flight
when the
units.
clock struck
They're
6.
way too expensive
Whereupon
for us
he labored
grunts.
to get up and
Too bad
said,
they can't mass produce
"I
these
must
things yet."
gang againwards home now, miss. My granddaughter won't like to be kept waitin' when the tea is ready, for it takes me time to crammel abound the grease, for there be a many of 'em. And miss, I lack belly timber, sarely by the clock." He hobbled away, and I could see him hurrying, as well as he could, down the steps. The steps are a great feature on the place. They lead from the town to the church. There are hundreds of them, I do not know how many, and they wind up in a delicate curve. The slope is so gentle that a horse could easily walk up and down them. I think they must originally have had something to do with the abbey. I shall go home too. Lucy went out, visiting with her mother, and as they were only duty calls, I did not go. They will be home by this. 1st August. I came up here an hour ago with Lucy, and we had a most interesting talk with my old friend and
This
the 2
here's my
others who
room.
always come and
Feel
join
free
him.
to swing by whenever you
He
want.
is evidently
Not
the
that there's
Sir
much
Oracle
to do
of
here.
them, and I should think must have been in his time a most dictatorial person. He will not admit anything, and down faces everybody. If he can't out-argue them, he bullies them, and then takes their silence for agreement with his views. Lucy was looking sweetly pretty in her white lawn frock. She has got a beautiful color since she has been here. I noticed that the old men did not lose any time in coming up and sitting near her when we sat down. She is so sweet with old people. I think they all fell in love with her on the spot. Even my old man succumbed and did not contradict her, but gave me double share instead. I got him on the subject of the legends, and he went off at once into a sort of sermon. I must try to remember it and put it all down. It be all fool talk, lock, stock, and barrel. That's what it be, and nowt else. These bands and wafts and bar ghosts and bar guests and bogles and all aments them is only fit to set bairns and dizzy women a belderin'. They be nowt but airblebs. They and all grims and sights and warnin's be all invented by parsons and ilsome book bodies and railway touters to skeer and scunner halflins, and to get folks to do something that they don't other inclined to do. It makes me ireful to think of them. Why, it's them that, not content with printing lies on paper and preaching them out of pulpits, does want to be cutting them on the tombstones. Look here all around you and whate'er you will. All them stains holding up their heads as well they can out of their pride is a cant, simply tumbling down with the weight of the lies wrote on 'em. Here lies the body, or sacred to the memory wrote on all of 'em. And yet in nigh half of them there bain't no bodies at all, and the memories of them bain't cared a pinch of snuff about, much less sacred. Lies, all of them, nothing but lies of one kind or another. My gog, but it'll be a quare wonderment of the day of judgment when they come tumbling up in their death sarks, all drooped together and trying to drag their tombstones with them to prove how good they was. Some of them trimlin' and ditherin' with their hands that dozened and slippin' from lying in the sea, that they can't even keep their grip of them. I could see from the old fellow's self-satisfied air and the way in which he looked round for the approval of his cronies that he was showing off. So I put in a word to keep him going. Oh, Mr. Swales, you can't be serious.
The hangar's up
Surely
ahead.
These tombstones
Let's
are
go.
not all wrong. Yablins. There may be a poorish few not wrong, savin' where they make out the people too good, for there be folk that do think a balm bowl be like the sea, if only it be their own. The whole thing be only lies. Now look ye here. You come here a stranger, and you see this Kirkgarth. I nodded, for I thought it better to assent, though I did not quite understand his dialect. I knew it had something to do with the church. He went on, and you consate that all these stains be aboon folk that be happened here, snod and snog? I assented again. Then that be just where the lie comes in. Why, there be scores of these lay-beds that be tomb as old Dunn's back-a-box on Friday night. He nudged one of his companions, and they all laughed. And my gog, how could they be otherwise? Look at that one, the aftest abaft the beer bank. Read it. I went over and read. Edward Spenslaw, master mariner, murdered by pirates off the coast of Andres, April 1854, at 30. When I came back, Mr. Swales went on. Who brought him home, I wonder, to hap him here? Murdered off the coast of Andres, and you consated his body lay under? Why, I could name ye a dozen whose bones lie in the Greenland seas above, he pointed northwards, or where the currents may have drifted them. There be the stains around ye. Ye can with your young eyes read the small print of the lies from here. This Braithwaite Lowry, I knew his father, lost in the Lively off Greenland in 20, or Andrew Woodhouse, drowned in the same seas in 1777,
Hey, 2B,
or John Paxton,
why do you think they
drowned
send a
off Cape
combat
Farewell
model
a
like
year
you to a
later,
recon
or
job?
old John
If all they want is
Rawlins,
intel,
whose
we scanner
grandfather
models
sailed
are
with
built
me,
for that kind of
drowned
thing.
in the Gulf
Orders
of
are
Finland in
orders.
50.
All right.
Do you think that all these men will have to make a rush to Whitby when the trumpet sounds? I have me antherums aboot it. I tell ye that when they got here, they'd be jomlin' and jostling one another that way, that it'd be like a fight up on the ice in the old days, when we'd be at one another from daylight to dark, and trying to tie up
2B,
our cuts
you're
by the
going to
light
have
of the
some new
aurora
weaponry
borealis.
installed from here on out.
This
I'll put up
was
instructions
evidently
for
local
you.
pleasantry,
Make sure
for
to
the
commit them
old
to
man
memory.
cackled
Roger.
over it, and his cronies joined in with gusto. But, I said, surely you are not quite correct, for you start on the assumption that all these poor people, or their spirits, will have to take their tombstones with them on the Day of Judgment. Do you think that will be really necessary? Well, what else be they tombstones for? Answer me that, miss. To please their relatives, I suppose. To please their relatives, you suppose. This he said with intense scorn. How will it pleasure their relatives to know that lies is wrote over them, and that everybody in the place knows that they be lies? He pointed to a stone at our feet which had been laid down in the slab, on which the seat was rested, close to the edge of the cliff. Read the lies on that rough scene, he said. The letters were upside down to me from where I sat, but Lucy was more opposite to them, so she leant over and read, Sacred to the memory of George Cannon, who died in the hope of glorious resurrection
Bunker to 2B,
on July
come in.
29,
I've set a landing point for your
1873,
flight units.
falling
You'll
from
be
the
touching
rocks
down
at
quite a ways
Kettleness.
from the resistance
This
camp,
tomb was
unfortunately.
erected by his
Sorry for
sorrowing
the
mother
trouble,
to
but
her
we
dearly
can't risk
beloved
the enemy
son.
discovering their
He
position.
was the only
Understood.
son of his
Good
mother,
luck down there.
and she was a widow. Really, Mr. Swales, I don't see anything very funny in that. She spoke her comment very gravely and somewhat severely. You don't see out funny? Ha! Ha! But that's because you don't gom the sorrowing mother was a hellcat that hated him because he was accrued. A regular limiter he was, and he hated her so that he committed suicide in order that she mightn't get an insurance she put on his life. He blew nigh the top of his head off with an old musket that they had for scaring the crows with. 'Twarn't for crows then, for it brought the clegs and the doubts to him. That's the way he fell off the rocks. And as to hopes of a glorious resurrection, I've often heard him say myself that he hoped he'd go to hell, for his mother was so pious that she'd be sure to go to heaven, and he didn't want to addle where she was. Now isn't that stain at any rate? He hammered it with his stick as he spoke. A pack of lies! And won't it make Gabriel keckle when Geordie comes panting up the grease with the tombstone balanced in his hump and asked to be took as evidence? I did not know what to say, but Lucy turned the conversation as she said, rising up, Oh, why did you tell us of this?
Target
It is
location
my
acquired.
favorite seat,
Marking on
and I
map.
cannot leave it.
Proposal.
And now I
Proceed
find
to
I must
target
go on
location.
sitting over the grave of a suicide? That won't harm you, my pretty, and it may make poor Georgie gladsome to have so trim a lass sitting on his lap. That won't hurt ye. Why, I've sat here off and on for nigh 20 years past, and it hasn't done me no harm. Don't ye fash about them as lies under ye, or that doesn't lie there either. It'll be time for ye to be getting scart when you see the
You
tombstones
should
all
know
run
better
away
than to
with,
try that.
and the places bare
Not
as
even a
stubble
cutting-edge
field.
Yorha like you would
There's
survive
the
that
clock,
kind
and
of
I must
fall.
gang.
Try not to
My
act so
service to ye,
recklessly, all
ladies.
right?
And off he hobbled. Lucy and I sat a while, and it was all so beautiful before us that we took hands as we sat, and she told me all over again about Arthur and their coming marriage. That made me just a little heartsick, for I haven't heard from Jonathan for a whole month. The same day. I came up here alone, for I am very sad. There was no letter for me. I hope there cannot be anything the matter with Jonathan. The clock has just struck 9. I see the lights scattered all over the town, sometimes in rows where the streets are, and sometimes singly. They run right up the Esk and die away in the curve of the valley. To my left, the view is cut off by a black line of roof of the old house next to the abbey. The sheep and
According
lambs
to our
are bleating in
intel,
the
none of the
fields away
machines in this
behind me,
area are
and there is a
hostile.
clatter of
We've been
donkeys'
seeing
hooves
more
up
and
the
more
paved
enemies
road
like this
below.
lately.
The
They just
band on the
stand
pier is
there and
playing a
stare into
harsh waltz
space.
in good time,
It's
and
pretty
further
weird.
along the quay there is a Salvation Army meeting in a back street. Neither of the bands hear the other, but up here I hear and see them both. I wonder where Jonathan is, and if he is thinking of me. I wish he were here. Dr. Seward's Diary, 5 June. The case of Renfield grows more interesting the more I get to understand the man. He has certain qualities very largely developed: selfishness, secrecy, and purpose. I wish I could get at what is the object of the latter. He seems to have some settled scheme of his own, but what it is I do not know. His redeeming quality is a love of animals, though indeed he has such curious turns in it that I sometimes imagine he is only abnormally cruel. His pets are of odd sorts. Just now, his hobby is catching flies. He has at present such a quantity that I have had myself to expostulate. To my astonishment, he did not break out into a fury, as I expected, but took the matter in simple seriousness. He thought for a moment and then said, "May I have 3 days? I shall clear them away." Of course, I said that would do. I must watch him. 18 June. He has turned his mind now to spiders, and has got several very big fellows in a box. He keeps feeding them with his flies, and the number of the latter is becoming sensibly diminished, although he has used half his food in attracting more flies from outside to his room. 1 July. His spiders are now becoming as great a nuisance as his flies, and today I told him that he must get rid of them. He looked very sad at this, so I said that he must clear out some of them, at all events. He cheerfully acquiesced to this, and I gave him the same time as before for reduction. He disgusted me much while with him, for when a horrid blowfly, loaded with some carrion food, buzzed into the room, he caught it, held it exultantly for a few moments between his finger and thumb, and before I knew what he was going to do, put it in his mouth and ate it. I scolded him for it, but he argued quietly that it was very good and very wholesome, that it was life, strong life, and gave life to him. This gave me an idea, or the rudiment of one. I must watch how he gets rid of his spiders. He has evidently some deep problems in his mind, for he keeps a little notebook in which he is always jotting down something. Whole pages of it are filled with masses of figures, generally single numbers added up in batches, and then the totals added in batches again, as though he were focusing some account, as the auditors put it. 8 July. There is a method in his madness, and the rudimentary idea in my mind is growing. It will be a whole idea soon, and then, oh, unconscious celebration. You will have to give the wall to your conscious brother. I kept away from my friend for a few days, so that I might notice if there were any change. Things remain as they were, except that he has parted with some of his pets and got a new one. He has managed to get a sparrow, and has already partially tamed it. His means of taming is simple, for already the spiders have diminished. Those that do remain, however, are well fed, for he still brings in the flies by tempting them with his food. 19 July. We are progressing. My friend has now a whole colony of sparrows, and his flies and spiders are
So
almost
this is the
obliterated.
resistance camp, huh?
When I came
We should
in,
probably
he
go
ran
talk to their
me
leader
and said
first
he wanted
thing.
to ask me a great favor. A very, very great favor. And as he spoke, he fawned on me like a dog. I asked him what it was, and he said, with a sort of rapture in his voice and bearing, "A kitten. A nice, little, sleek, playful kitten that I can play with and teach and feed and feed and feed." I was not unprepared for this request, for I had noticed how his pets went on increasing in size and vivacity, but I did not care that his pretty family of tame sparrows should be wiped out in the same manner as the flies and spiders. So I said I would see about it, and asked him if he would rather not have a cat than a kitten. His eagerness betrayed him as he answered, "Oh yes, I would like a cat. I only asked for a kitten lest you should refuse me a cat. No one would refuse me a kitten, would they?"
You know
I
about
shook my head
2B?
and said that at present I feared it would not be possible,
the bunker told
but
me
that
to
I would
expect
see
you.
about it.
My name is
His
Anemone.
face fell,
I'm
and I
the
could
leader
see a
of the
warning
android resistance
danger
that
in
controls
it,
most
for there
of
was
this
a sudden,
territory.
fierce,
You must be the new
sidelong
scouts
look,
we heard about.
which meant
Well,
killing.
I'm sure my
The
people
man
will have
is an
plenty of
undeveloped
information for you.
homicidal maniac.
Please feel free to ask
I
them
shall
anything
test
you
him
like.
with his present craving and see how it will work out. Then I shall know more. 10 p.m. I have visited him again and found him sitting in a corner, brooding. When I came in, he threw himself on his knees before me and implored me to let him have a cat, that his salvation depended upon it. I was firm, however, and told him that he could not have it, whereupon he went without a word and sat down, gnawing his fingers in the corner where I had found him. I shall see him in the morning, early. 20 July. Visited Renfield very early, before the attendant went his rounds. Found him up and humming a tune. He was spreading out his sugar, which he had saved, in the window, and was manifestly beginning his fly-catching again, and beginning it cheerfully and with a good grace. I looked around for his birds, and not seeing them, asked him where they were. He replied, without turning around, that they had all flown away. There were a few feathers about the room, and on his pillow a drop of blood. I said nothing, but went and told the keeper to report to me if there were anything odd about him during the day. 11 a.m. The attendant has just been to me to say that Renfield has been very sick and has disgorged a whole lot of feathers. My belief is, doctor, he said, that he has eaten his birds, and that he just took and ate them raw. 11 p.m. I gave Renfield a strong opiate tonight, enough to make even him sleep, and took away his pocketbook to look at it. The thought that has been buzzing around my brain lately is complete, and the theory proved. My homicidal maniac is of a peculiar kind. I shall have to invent a new classification for him and call him a zoophagus, life-eating maniac. What he desires is to absorb as many lives as he can, and he has laid himself out to achieve it in a cumulative way. He gave many flies to one spider, and many spiders to one bird, and then wanted a cat to eat the many birds. What would have been his later steps? It would almost be worthwhile to complete the experiment. It might be done if there were only a sufficient cause. Men sneered at vivisection, and yet look at its results today. Why not advance science in its most difficult and vital aspect, the knowledge of the brain? Had I even the secret of one such mind, did I hold the key to the fancy of even one lunatic, I might advance my own branch of science to a pitch compared with which Burdock Sanderson's physiology or Ferrier's brain knowledge would be as nothing. If only there were a sufficient cause. I must not think too much of this, or I may be tempted. A good cause might turn the scale with me, for may not I too be of an exceptional brain, congenitally? How well the man reasoned. Lunatics always do within their own scope. I wonder at how many lives he values a man, or if at only one. He has closed the account most accurately, and today begun a new record. How many of us begin a new record with each day of our lives? To me it seems only yesterday that my whole life ended with my new hope, and that truly I began a new record. So it will be until the great recorder sums me up and closes my ledger account with a balance to profit or loss. Oh, Lucy, Lucy, I cannot be angry with you, nor can I be angry with my friend, whose happiness is yours. But I must only wait on hopeless and work. Work, work. If I only could have as strong a cause as my poor mad friend there, a good, unselfish cause to make me work, that would be indeed happiness. Mina Murray's Journal, 26 July. I am anxious, and it soothes me to express myself here. It is like whispering to oneself and listening at the same time, and there is also something about the shorthand symbols that makes it different from writing. I am unhappy about Lucy and about Jonathan. I had not heard from Jonathan for some time and was very concerned, but yesterday dear Mr. Hawkins, who is always so kind, sent me a letter from him. I had written asking him if he had heard, and he said the enclosed had just been received. It is only a line dated from Castle Dracula, and says that he is just starting for home. That is not like Jonathan. I do not understand it, and it makes me uneasy. Then, too, Lucy, although she is so well, has lately taken to the old habit of walking in her sleep. Her mother has spoken to me about it, and we have decided that I am to lock the door of our room every night. Mrs. Westenra has got an idea that sleepwalkers always go out on roofs of houses and along the edges of cliffs, and then get suddenly wakened and fall over with a despairing cry that echoes all over the place. Poor dear. She is naturally anxious about Lucy, and she tells me that her husband, Lucy's father, had the same habit, that he would get up in the night and dress himself and go out, if he were not stopped. Lucy is to be married in the autumn, and she is already planning out her dresses and how her house is to be arranged. I sympathize with her, for I do the same, only Jonathan and I will start in life in a very simple way, and shall have to make both ends meet. jobs and shall have to try to make both ends meet. Mr. Holmwood, he is the Honorable Arthur Holmwood, only son of Lord Godalming, is coming up here very shortly, as soon as he can leave town, for his father is not very well, and I think dear Lucy is counting the moments till he comes. She wants to take him up in the seat on the churchyard cliff and show him the beauty of Whitby. I dare say it is the waiting which disturbs her. She will be all right when he arrives. 27 July. No news from Jonathan. I am getting quite uneasy about him, though why I should, I do not know. But I do wish that he would write, if it were only a single line. Lucy walks more than ever, and each night I am awakened by her moving about the room. Fortunately, the weather is so hot that she cannot get cold, but still the anxiety and the perpetually being awakened is beginning to tell on me, and I am getting nervous and wakeful myself. Thank God, Lucy's health keeps up. Mr. Holmwood has been suddenly called to Ring to see his father, who has been taken seriously ill. Lucy frets at the postponement of seeing him, but it does not touch her looks. She is a trifle stouter, and her cheeks are a lovely rose pink. She has lost that anemic look which she had. I pray it will all last. 3 August. Another week gone, and no news from Jonathan, not even to Mr. Hawkins, from whom I have heard. Oh, I do hope he is not ill. He surely would have written. I look at that last letter of his, but somehow it does not satisfy me. It does not read like him, and yet it is his writing. There is no mistake of that. Lucy has not walked much in her sleep the past week, but there is an odd concentration about her which I do not understand. Even in her sleep, she seems to be watching me. She tries the door and finding it locked, goes about the room searching for the key. 6 August. Another 3 days, and no news. This suspense is getting dreadful. If I only knew where to write to, or where to go to, I should feel easier, but no one has heard a word of Jonathan since that last letter. I must only pray to God for patience. Lucy is more excitable than ever, but is otherwise well. Last night was very threatening, and the fishermen say that we are in for a storm. I must try to watch it and learn the weather signs. Today is a gray day, and the sun as I write is hidden in thick clouds, high over Kettleness. Everything is gray, except the green grass, which seems like emerald amongst it. Gray, earthy rock, gray clouds, tinged with the sunburst at the far edge, hang over the gray sea, into which the sand points stretch, like gray figures. The sea is tumbling in over the shallows and the sandy flats with a roar, muffled in the sea mists drifting inland. The horizon is lost in a gray mist. All is vastness. The clouds are piled up like giant rocks, and there is a brool over the sea that sounds like some presage of doom. Dark figures are on the beach here and there, sometimes half shrouded in the mist, and seem men like trees walking. The fishing boats are racing for home and rise and dip in the ground. The fishing boats are racing for home and rise and dip in the ground swell as they sweep into the harbor, bending to the scuppers. Here comes old Mr. Swales. He is making straight for me, and I can see, by the way he lifts his hat, that he wants to talk. I have been quite touched by the change in the poor old man. When he sat down beside me, he said in a very gentle way, "I want to say something to you, miss." I could see he was not at ease, so I took his poor old wrinkled hand in mine and asked him to speak fully. So he said, leaving his hand in mine, "I am afraid, my dearie, that I must have shocked you by all the wicked things I've been saying about the dead and such like for weeks past, but I didn't mean them, and I want you to remember that when I'm gone.
Let's begin.
Who is this Jedi?
I still got...
From Television City in Hollywood, the Jack Benny Program. with his special guests Dan Daly, Kirk Douglas, Fred McMurray, Tony Martin, and Dick Powell, presented by Lucky Strike.
This is glamorous movie star Rita Gam.
Know what I'm doing? I'm studying my chess. It's an interesting thing about chess. One move can mean the whole game. That's why I'm so careful with every move I make. I like to sit and smoke and really think it through. The cigarette, by the way, is Lucky Strike. I like its clean taste, nice aroma. It's my cigarette every time.
Rita Gam's reason for smoking Lucky Strike is the same one that many millions of other smokers give. They like the taste of a Lucky. And here's why a Lucky tastes better. It's right here on the pack. It's toasted. That's the famous Lucky Strike process that brings Lucky's fine tobacco to its peak of flavor. The process that tones up this mild, naturally good-tasting tobacco to make it taste even better. Well, that's our story, pure and simple. A Lucky tastes better because it's the cigarette of fine tobacco. And it's toasted to taste better. Cleaner, fresher, smoother.
So to get better taste from your cigarette, Lucky Strike is the brand to get. It's toasted to give you the best taste yet. It's the toasted cigarette.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Lucky Strike program. As you probably know, this is my second TV show of the season. And those of you who saw my first show 2 weeks ago will probably notice that tonight I'm a little more at ease. You see, it's working up to a first show that makes you so nervous. The anxiety, you worry about what the critics will say. I mean, what they'll write about me and everything. Well, anyway, it's over, and now I'm relaxed, you see. The reviews came in, I read them, I burned them, now let's forget them. Although I must say that I did get some very exceptionally good reviews on my first show. As a matter of fact, I saved some of them to read to you here from different towns that I... Excuse me just a moment.
Map data.
These are contact lenses. You keep the paper right up here.
Isn't so high. Hopefully they deploy some new satellites soon.
The general idea is good enough.
Probably the silliest thing I'll say
You don't
today.
let anything get in your way, do you?
But these reviews, here's one that I got from the Bi-Weekly Chronicle from Storm Center, Iowa. It says, on Jack Benny's first television show, once again, this master showman romped his way into the hearts of millions with his hilarious performance. Well, it's kind of nice, I think. And here's one from the Daily Bugle from U-Turn, Nebraska. It says, Jack Benny's first television show that has long been awaited by the citizens of U-Turn was welcomed with hearty laughs and much merriment. Here's one from the New York Times. Now, here's one. Here's one from Whistler's Bend, Montana. It says, Jack Benny, through the medium of television, came a rompin' and a stompin' into Whistler's Bend with a rootin' tootin' half hour of rip-roaring entertainment. Yahoo! Yahoo must be the name of the editor or something. Oh, here's one from the Chicago Herald American. I'm not one. You see, I never like to influence critics. But I must say that 23 years ago, when I first went on radio, I was so anxious to get a good review in the papers that I sent each critic $1. And after my first show, they were all very nice to me. They not only returned the $1, see, but they send me bread and canned goods. Oh, that was nice. But now tonight, getting back to my show tonight, ladies and gentlemen, you know, as much as I enjoy doing this show, I am anxious to get home because tonight at my house I'm having what we call a jam session. See, we have a lot of fellows who live in my neighborhood, and we all play different instruments, you see, and we meet once a week. And tonight we're meeting at my house again, you see, and I'm the leader of the orchestra. And, of course, when I was a kid, you know, I didn't know really, for my musical career, I didn't know which instrument to take up. So in order to help my father, you see, I took up the violin, because at that time my father had a combination tailor shop and gypsy tea room. I used to play and make a little money for him, you see, in between. But anyway, getting on with it. Oh, Don Wilson, will you come out here, please? Don, did you rehearse, go through the number that we prepared for the commercial, the one that I was talking about this morning?
Jack, I've been thinking it over, and I feel the same way about it I did this morning. I don't want to do it.
What did you say, Don?
I certainly don't want to do it your way. I won't do it.
Look, Don, wait a minute, Don. You see, you have a contract with me, and you're supposed to do the commercial any way that I want you to do it.
Oh, but Jack, the whole thing is so ridiculous and embarrassing.
Don, believe me. Will you listen to me? I've been in show business many, many years. And I know that a commercial must be unique and different and entertaining. Now, you go and get the props.
Oh, well.
You know, ladies and gentlemen, I don't mind a man being stubborn. But when he's fat and stubborn, I mean, that's too much. I mean, I've had more trouble with Don over commercials. I've never seen anything like it. This fellow will not...
Jack, all right. Let's do it and get it over with.
Don, it's a commercial.
Yeah.
All right.
If you want better taste from your cigarette, Lucky Strike is the one.
Hold it. Take it again. No, take it again.
If you want better taste from your cigarette,
I think this entertaining.
Lucky Strike is the one to get.
Keep going. Take it over again. No, go. You go through. Now, Don, come back here. Now, look at Really, it wasn't bad. The audience loved it out there. You know?
Well, I guess it was all right.
You guessed?
Yeah.
Don, you were wonderful. I don't know. How do you know? Maybe tonight a star is born. With you, it could be the Big Dipper.
Mr. Benny.
You know, I mean, you don't have...
Oh, Mr. Benny, you're wanted on the phone.
Here?
Yes.
Excuse me a minute.
Yeah, run along.
You can take it right here, Mr. Benny.
In the studio.
Uh-huh. There you are.
Hello?
Hello, Mr. Benny, this is Rochester.
Rochester, I'm right in the middle of a monologue of my show. What did you call me for?
Well, I was thinking about your friends who were coming over for your jam session, and I was wondering what you wanted me to serve.
Well, I don't know. What have we got in the icebox?
Well, there's 2 turkeys, 3 hams, a 12-pound prime rib, and 10 pounds of imported caviar.
Rochester, all that wonderful food in our icebox?
Boss, we're on a party line. Let's impress them.
Oh, look, Rochester, prepare anything you want to. I'll be home at 8 o'clock.
Okay. Goodbye. Oh, the boss sure gets excited about those jam sessions. Well, he said he'd be home at 8 o'clock. Yep, that's what he said, 8 o'clock.
Here I am, Rochester. Did any of the gang get here yet?
Oh, don't worry, boss. They'll be here. I'm just straightening up, fixing the music
All right, fix
stand.
up all the music stands and the music. I want to tune up a little bit.
I'll fix some sandwiches.
Okay. Rochester, what are you doing?
I'm setting the clock back to 5:40. Didn't have a headache then.
Listen, will you cut that out? Hey, that must be one of the guys coming. Gee, I love these jam sessions. Hey there, you with the smog in your eye. Hi, Tony! How are you? Tony Martin, how are you?
How you feel, man?
Got the old instrument out.
Oh, yeah, Jack.
I got the music and everything, all the new arrangements.
Oh,
and everything.
wonderful, Jack. I'm so happy. You know, I wait all week for these jam sessions. I can't wait. I've been practicing like mad. Mad!
Yeah, Buck. Me
Yeah,
too.
good.
Tony, what kind of a clarinet is that?
I don't know, Jack. Must be a good one. I was offered about $150 for it.
Only $150. I was offered $3,000 for my violin.
Now, wait a minute, Jack. Who'd ever offer you $3,000 for your violin?
Everybody in the neighborhood chipped in.
You mean to tell me, Jack, when you play, everybody in Beverly Hills can hear you?
Some of the money came in from Anaheim, Azusa, and Coolabah.
Rochester, will you do me a favor and go get the sandwiches?
Yes.
Please.
Boy, oh boy. I need a new read. And I feel awful dry, Jack. Real dry. Tell me, how's Mary?
Oh, she's fine.
Haven't seen her for a long time.
You know, Tony, Mary's going to be on my show pretty soon.
Yeah,
you know?
that's good. That'll be just great.
Here comes somebody else.
Yeah.
I guess the gang is coming. Hey there, you with the dentist. Hey, Fred! Wait, grab your phone.
Hi, Fred. How's the wife?
Say, Fred, listen, Fred, I got a wonderful new arrangement for our number that we're going to do tonight.
Well, I hope
for
so.
practicing,
Yeah.
and it's going to be a great part for the saxophone.
Oh, good. I hope so. I didn't think I was going to get here on time, Jack. I was over at the studio and somebody sent a script at the last minute. I had to read it. Not much good. I don't think I'll do it.
What was the name of it?
The horn blows at noon.
The horn blows at noon?
Yes, the Warner Brothers wanted to see what it looks like in the daytime.
Very funny, very funny.
I thought so.
Yeah. Fred, you looking good.
Yeah, I didn't have a chance to get lunch.
Here, I got your part here for you. Just go over this part and see if it's all right, will you? Huh?
Good to see you, Tony.
Anybody home?
Hey, Dick!
Say, am I late, huh?
No, there are only three. There'll be a couple more.
I'm sorry. I'd have been here a little sooner. I had a little accident.
Did you get hurt?
No, I got out of the car just in time.
Why, what happened?
My Jaguar chased an MG up a tree.
Everybody has to come in with jokes.
Jack,
What?
your piano's out of tune.
Here. Here's this.
Is that my part?
That's your part.
Well,
here.
don't rush me. I'm a little tired. Been shooting all day. I want to relax a little bit.
On this saxophone. Somebody else is coming. coming.
Hi, Jack. How are you?
Well, almost everybody's here now. Okay.
Hey, Jack.
What?
Jack, I've been looking over this arrangement, this new one.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see any part in it for me. I mean, this da-da-da-da-da-da-da. What kind
Well,
of part
Fred,
is
look,
that?
no, that's background music when Tony Martin takes his solo.
Tony has the solo?
I can handle it.
That's beside the point.
What?
The point is, Jack, last week you told me you were going to make a new arrangement and I would have the solo.
Well, Fred, it just didn't work out that way.
I see.
Fred, what are you doing?
I'm going home. I'm a movie star and I'm not going to be humiliated like this.
Tony, you talk to him, will you, please?
Now listen, Fred, I know how you feel. You can have the 12-bar solo, but please put your horn together and join us. Come on.
Well, all right.
I think we ought to play the arrangement just the way it's written.
Look, Tony and I can handle this ourselves.
Yeah, we don't need a dancer to tell us what to do, you know.
Thanks, Tony, you're a peach.
Why, certainly, let's play something. For heaven's sake. Let's play
Jack, I got a yellow one. I get a prize.
Oh, wait, I tell you, we're all here. I tell you who else is coming. I know it must be them. It's from my radio orchestra. Bagby and Remley and John Rice and the whole thing. Come on in, fellas. I know who it is. Come in. Hi, Bagby. Hi, boy. Hey, Bagby. Right in. Where's Frank Remley?
Oh, he couldn't make it, Jack. You see, he lives in Hollywood and you live in Beverly Hills.
Well, what's that got to do with it?
Well, he can't leave Hollywood without getting permission from his parole board.
Well, what are we going to do?
Oh, don't worry, Jack. I called up another
You
band.
missed the word parole at every rehearsal.
Don't you worry.
Well, who's going to play banjo? You got somebody?
I called up another banjo
thanks.
player.
I'm glad you play. Go on, play. Oh, that must be the banjo player. That must be the banjo player. Hey, Kurt! Hey, Kurt, look. Hi. When you came to my house to play bridge last week, you didn't tell me that you played banjo.
Well, nobody asked me, man. Nobody asked me.
Oh.
Hey, Kirk, what do you got hanging on your back there?
What's that?
What's this?
Oh, you know, on the way down here, some crazy jaguar chased my MG up a tree.
What did you want me to do? Shoot it?
I thought you made up a joke.
I haven't seen you for a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
You look a little heavy, like you put on some weight.
No, I'm the same. My weight hasn't changed. It's always 180.
Gee, I don't believe it. You look like you weigh a lot more than that.
Well, I don't think so. I'll find out here. 184 with banjo.
What's it say on the other side?
Other side? Bowling in the basement.
We'll all go down that later. We got what kind of sandwiches are they?
Peanut butter and jelly. Peanut butter and jelly? What happened to the hams, the turkeys, and the imported caviar?
What?
I'm on your party line.
Oh, well, what's the difference? We'll eat later. Hey, Kirk. Now, look, Kirk, come here. I got the part for you right here. Here's your music for what we're going to play.
Music? You know, I don't read music. All I can play is Bye Bye Blues.
Well, look, we're not going to play Bye Bye Blues. We're going to play Basin Street.
I don't know Basin Street. I tell you, the only thing I know is Bye Bye Blues.
Well, perhaps we're going to play Basin Street, then fake it.
All right.
Little jam session.
Play. I gotta get out of here.
Now, wait a minute, give me a head. the leader now. Wait, all right? Ready? 1 second.
Good beat, huh?
1, 2, 3, 4. And this is my house.
Those are my drums.
Horn. Let's play. Hang on a second. Now play what we got written, will you? All right. 1, 2, 3, 4.
But first, here's a message from our sponsor.
If you want better taste from your cigarette, Lucky Strike is the brand to get. It's toasted to give you the best taste yet. It's the toasted cigarette. They take fine tobacco, it's light tobacco, it's mild tobacco too. And it's toasted, yes, it's toasted, because the toasting brings the flavor right through. So to get better taste from your cigarette, Lucky Strike is the brand to get. It's toasted to give you the best taste yet. It's the toasted cigarette.
Friends, no wonder Lucky's taste better. They're made of fine tobacco and the famous Lucky Strike process. It's toasted. Tones up Lucky's fine tobacco to make it taste even better. Cleaner, fresher, smoother. So, be happy. Go Lucky.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you think we played badly, how about Stanford yesterday? Of course, I must say, you know, it was a shame that I had to pull the curtain down, you know, right in the middle of our number, but I had to do it before the commercial because I told all those guys this was a benefit. Anything about it. But really, it was so nice of these fellas, here are 5 big stars, to come over here and really give their services. They came over here on my show just because they enjoyed doing it and had a lot of fun. So I'd like to bring them back again to take a bow over here. Come on, boys. I would like to pay you all a compliment. You are the lousiest musicians in my life. But, you know, I do think, in all fairness, ladies and gentlemen, the fact that they did come here for nothing, to work for nothing. I do think that somebody... Yes, Fred, didn't you know about that?
They didn't tell me.
Oh, well. I'm telling you now. The only thing, I do think it would be fair if just, you know, if somebody went back with something. Now, I want you to forget that these are all big stars, you see. I want you to just consider them musicians, amateur musicians. Now, I'll hold some money. I will hold a $5 bill over each one's head. And the one who gets the most applause is a... Listen, the one who gets the most applause will go home with the money. So much for our spectacular. Every show has a spectacular, so I thought I'd put one on tonight. And incidentally, in about... have I got time to say something? Just a second, because I just wanted to announce that either in 2 weeks from now or in 4 weeks, we're doing our version of Caine Mutiny. And our guest star is going to be Leo DeRocha. Well, anyway, I will be back in 2 weeks, and be sure to listen to Watch and Southern next Sunday. Thank you.
Remember, 1 week from tonight on this same station, and Southern returns in Private Secretary. Jack Benny's next television show will be in 2 weeks. In the meantime, be sure to listen to Jack Benny on radio every Sunday night over the CBS Radio Network. The Jack Benny program has been brought to you by Lucky Strike, product of the American Tobacco Company, America's leading manufacturer of cigarettes. This is Don Wilson saying, be happy, go lucky.
Thank you very, very much, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the show. Now, first of all, I must tell you something that happened to me yesterday. You know, we had a kind of a tough rehearsal, and a lot of problems came up, and I was nervous. And so in order to relax, I thought I'd jump in my car and take a drive up the coast highway, which I did. And when I got a little past Oxnard, I decided to stop and get a dozen oranges. Now, that's a reasonable idea, but not for me. I had to rip my pants on the barbed wire fence. Then I got back in the car, and I went on as far, and when I arrived at Santa Barbara, you see, I noticed on a little marquee on a little theater there, they were presenting a play that I had never seen, and I was so anxious to see it. It was Death of a Salesman. So I went in, I bought a ticket, went in, and sat down. And out of 300 people in a theater 70 miles away, who do you think was sitting next to me? Dennis Day. That's all I needed. And all the time, the actors, when they were working, Dennis was making a lot of silly remarks.